So here's the pitch, okay? We've all seen Myth Swifts. It's that outtake show, and it was running in, and I saw chat spamming when I told Jordan to focus. So we're gonna run with that. Strike while the iron is hot. Jordan sitting at his desk at the video team section. I don't know what they do. I don't care what they do. But for the premise of this video, cannot be focused. Watching anime butts on one screen. I don't care what he's doing. Just can't be working. All right. And then he hears Myth Swifts. Big TV right behind him. Myth Swifts playing. Here's the line. Says Jordan, focus. Okay. And then his eyes go wide. He turns around. Turns off the TV. He's trying to get rid of me. He knows he's not focused, but he knows he needs to be. But goes back to his desk, goes back to doing whatever he's doing. But he has to focus. So I'm at his window. Boom, slam on the window. I'm like the Babadook, okay? He doesn't know where I'm coming from. I slam the window, piece of paper, says focus. He does a little bit. He focuses a little bit. He doesn't turn off the anime butts. No. He flips his hat around, Ash Ketchum style. I don't know. And then he goes back to doing anything he wants, but not focusing. That's not enough for me. That's not enough for hi-rez. It's not enough for what we stand for. So I appear behind the wall behind him, okay? Boom, Mifflin, up there. I tell him to tighten up. He needs to focus. He does a little bit more. He focuses a little bit, but not enough, okay? And then it's not enough for me. It's not enough for me, okay? We have to go even further beyond that, all right? He does eventually close the screen, but that's not enough. I'm still appearing. I'm appearing everywhere. I'm in the bathroom. I'm in his cereal. I'm in his snacks. I'm telling him to focus, and eventually he switches desks. I'm under his desk, okay? I'm telling him to focus there, and that's where it happens. He sits in a maxonomic chair, his eyes dilate, and he finally finds his focus.
Okay. Approved.
I sold it? I sold it! Yes! I'm gonna sell so many chairs.
Jordan, what the was that? We just lived a fever dream. I have no idea what just happened, and we approved it.
What kind of anime butts we talking? What kind of anime butts we talking?
And welcome back to the desk, and mostly welcome back to our lovely Maxnomic SMITE chair, modeled by our oh-so-wonderful man of production, Jithens. If you've ever been wondering what Jithens looks like, or what one of these SMITE Maxonomic chairs looks like, you have a perfect model. What you got there, Jithens? He's got the bear. I just noticed he walked over and has the bear with him.
You better be careful with that, Jithens.
Yeah, don't break it. If you break that anymore, you're going to be in some serious danger. But if you want to get yourselves one of these lovely SMITE Maxonomic chairs, you can go to needforseat.com and use code SMITEMAX to get a discount code and get yourselves one of those lovely chairs and help you focus just inside your work, whether you're playing games or just chilling, watch some YouTube videos or anything else for it. J Mac Tucker joined me with Taco, so we get ready to break down the Atlantis Leviathans and the Camelot Kings for our second set of the day, and this is a huge one for both of these teams. The Atlantis Leviathans, they're on the tail end of being at that top spot. They're sitting, I believe, it's 7-4 according to the standings. Camelot Kings are at the top, and there's a very small chance that with the win here, the Leviathans could possibly make it to that top seed.
Yeah, it's very slim margins here that the Atlantis Leviathans are trying to work through, J-Mac, and with the schedule, as you guys could tell, Atlantis Leviathans is set, and as well as the Camelot Kings. This will be their closing out for the weekend, but as far as those standings were concerned, one more time, those Atlantis Leviathans, they're trying to play leapfrog right now, and if you're going to tackle Dragons, Bolts, or the Kings, closing it out perfect is going to be tough.
Now, funny enough, all four of these teams are playing this weekend. Today we have, the Kings and Leviathans as mentioned, and tomorrow is the Bolts and the Dragons, so we could see a ton of shakeup in these top four, but the Leviathans are looking to make their mark quick and early here for the weekend to try and get themselves one step closer to that standings for it. It's going to be a difficult one, though. The Camelot Kings are coming off a huge hot streak from their last few sets.
Yeah, they have just been absolutely on fire, and I think a lot of their success has also been stemming from those side lanes, especially looking at the things that Genetics and Variety have been able to accomplish, really just creating so much space for big man tanks to operate in that mid lane. It just seems like this entire team, when you have those moments where they kind of just mesh, that's exactly what's been the case for the Kings, and for the Atlantis Leviathans, I think we've definitely seen those consistency factors, but this is where the real test to the max is going to be pushed.
And one of those key players for Leviathans that's been allowing them to get those side lanes so far ahead has been their jungler, Panatom. He has been a huge front line for them. This warrior-style jungle that's been popping out has been no stranger to any of the players, and Panatom has made great use of it. We've seen Erlong Shen's, Gilgamesh, Osiris, and even some of the assassins still trickling around his god pool. So Panatom looking to make a name here for the Leviathans and try and fight back against the Camelot Kings in this first set.
And it's interesting, too, that a jungle player, of all things, is able to actually be as much of a facilitating factor as what we've seen from Benitham at times, because it's just simply the role with the least amount of a farm, and especially when you're Benitham teaming with Shinto, of all people, you know that you're going to be stressed at times. But I think that that's what also makes him such an important asset to this team, is that he fully accepts that role of just, I'll be the sacrificial lamb if it's for the greater good.
You know, in their matchup with the Titans previously, a lot of the talk was around the mid lane and the Raijin. I think that these warrior jungles are going to be huge because that's been where Captain Twig has defaulted to most of his, as well as now Panatom fighting for those warrior style roles. So you've been seeing a lot of these highlights have been Gilgamesh, and with these two teams, I cannot imagine that Gilgamesh is going to be let through.
Well, given the fact that the Camelot Kings seem to place a little bit more priority into this Osiris, it's the Osiris Gilgamesh show that might be called to a challenge here by both ends. It really just depends on who's going to be in that first pick position, because there is always the chance that we see the Atlantis Leviathans maybe look to just cancel out genetics. I mean, how many times now have we noticed where teams have just insisted on banning support after support after support? So maybe Benitham does get a pick that he would like.
Maybe we can pick at Benitham's brain here as well and see what he's kind of thinking as we get ready to go into the interview with Panatom standing by. Panatom, huge win from the Kings in their last couple of sets. Now you guys have got to go against them, and after your win for the Titans, how's the mentality and the morale feeling for the team?
We're feeling good. They have been in a good streak, but I mean, we're getting like playing better as a team, and I don't know. I think we can have a good game today.
Have you guys done any prep work going up against the Kings, maybe specifically some jungle prep? I know that you and Captain Twig have shared a lot of the same god pool in the last few weeks.
Yeah, we have prep against that team, but not specifically about Twig, just like in the entire team because they play well as 5.
Yeah, with a team like this, with how diverse all of their god pools are, how difficult is it to really draft around this team?
Oh yeah, it's really hard. They play a lot of stuff, weird picks. Yeah, it's pretty hard to prepare against them.
Well, good luck in your match today, Panatom. Best of luck to you against the Kings.
Thank you.
I think kind of following up with what he said and what we just talked about, this is a hard team to draft against for the Kings. Every one of these players has such a wide and diverse god pool that it really does make it difficult when it comes to the drafting phase.
And that might just be a little bit more catered towards maybe not necessarily looking for those individual bans, but maybe just trying to take away god bans that might play into certain compositions that we've seen the Kings prefer, because they definitely love doing some of that double guardian aspect. And Twig alone, I mean, we've talked about the Osiris a ton for him, but it might be cool to see him rocking something else today.
Maybe we will get to see that. As mentioned, it's a lot of the same warriors amongst the draft 4. Maybe a little bit less with the Erlong Shen for Captain Twig than Panatom would go towards, but Osiris and Gilgamesh are definitely the two biggest talking points for Captain Twig. They've been his two most popular. I would say the Osiris has been by far his most popular god that he's been locking in. It's just because teams are allowing it. They're not so concerned about it, but I think you need to be.
Yeah, this Osiris has been a very big problem for so many teams that have gone up against the Kings in the past that have fallen them as well, even some being a little bit more favored, I would argue, to win in these sets against the Camelot Kings. But Twig, I believe he's even stated it in past interviews after set victories. He has accepted the fact that, you know, jungle is a role where he's not really looking so much to control his direct opposition as much as he is just trying to generate some space for the rest of his team to work.
Recognizing that, as you mentioned previously, the farm is a little bit on the lower end for junglers this time around. It seems that the farm across the map is a little bit more diverse for everybody else, where jungles kind of struggled. So going for these more warrior-centric, these more team-centric, and trying to build up the fruits of your early game through maybe your mid laner, maybe through your duo or your solo laner as well. So we'll kind of see how that shakes up the draft. We'll honestly, you know, talking when we had the Titans, it was, I think Raijin needs to be, you know, one of the first gods, you know, talk about picked or banned. I think it might flip to this side for these two, maybe seeing Gilgamesh or Osiris be one of the tops.
Then again, Shinto, he's had that 100% win rate. You almost have to wonder, though, the Camelot Kings, we've seen them once before be the gatekeepers. So maybe, what if they end up letting the Raijin through because they've, like, come up with this huge constructive strategy to deal with Raijin? I would not put it past the Kings in the slightest. This is a team that, while I think that Twig's picks might fall a little bit more under predictable measures. Everywhere else is where the problem lies, as even Benitham was willing to admit in his interview. But man on the screen, I think, could come up big time here for the Atlantis Leviathans, and not even necessarily for his late game shot calling that they've been referencing so often, but more so just because the fact that Zap just knows these teams very well. I mean, he's been a part of the league for years now, and so he might have a pretty big say as to what might work best against the likes of the Kings.
Zapman is one of those few players left in the league that you can say Zapman is as old as competitive Smite is as far as his career goes. So if there's any seasoned player to throw onto any of these teams, I would say it'd be Zapman. He's meshed really well with these Leviathans in the first week. He was able to help push the Bolts to a 3-game set. So he's meshed well with these guys, and their play style really works alongside him. He's able to just comfortably sit in the back line, and that's been the biggest problems for teams going against Leviathans, is putting pressure against the mid, putting pressure against the carry. We'll see if the Kings are able to make that adaptation. Maybe will they be the gatekeepers to the Raijin? Well, let's find out if he even gets locked in, or maybe if it gets banned away.
Also excited to see what happens in that solo lane, especially because Variety has been rather aggressive with a lot of those 1v1 instances in the laning phase, and anytime Variety is able to establish a lead, he definitely makes his impact known elsewhere on the map. So just food for thought, I think, for the Leviathans, but seems as though mid lane is going to be the initial focus, at least, with that Hell being taken off the board. And that's just another pick where I think it really just depends on what teams are playing that day for who you're going to see trying to prioritize these healer bans.
And at one point it was only Paul playing this Hell. Now it seems that every team has some kind of Hell in their pocket, whether it be from their mid or, in the Kings case, along the side of Variety, who had a big game on it previously as well. I believe that was against the Titans that he had a massive breakout game for it. But first bans have come through. It's Hell and Rom taken away, and I like that shot. This is one of the only teams that has actually taken this Rom away from Netroid, and I love the response from it. He's been killing it on this god. Has had such a great performance recently, and finally we'll now have to see him on something different.
Should be an interesting matchup as well. I mean, I feel like it's always worth mentioning the fact that this is Netroid's literal old team. Like, those were his boys at one point in time, and now he's got to go with this new squad of the Kings to try and duke it out against them and maybe make them, reconsider about who should have actually ended up in that Hunter position.
Wow.
But it's all in good fun. But the Raijin as well, so clearly some target bans definitely being placed from both of these teams, but I like the thought process here so far from the Leviathans. I think that those are some very key bans that they have chosen to take up against the Kings.
What do you think is more satisfying in this instance for them? Is it banning the Raijin and then potentially winning the game because you took the Raijin away, or would it be letting the Raijin through and being the one to shut that record down?
It might say a lot more. I think it would be more of a mental chalker if you get the Raijin and lose with it. But on that same note, the fact that it's respect ban, I think says a lot as well. Shinto definitely going to have to keep in mind that the Kings have certainly taken note of how much he's able to control whenever he's actually with a lead or just farming it out in general. So Izanami and Gilgamesh as the immediate responses from the Kings, that is a lot of pressure.
Yeah, but the Raijin Tiamat banned away for the Camelot Kings. Leviathans will have to look towards a different mid laner, as their powerhouse mid lane Raijin, as we talked about a little bit, has been banned away. So Shinto's not going to be able to continue the undefeated streak. Instead, it'll be put on pause for the moment to see what option he goes to. We've been seeing a little bit more Morgan Le Fay coming whenever these kind of picks have been taken away. Maybe we'll see that here, as does indeed get locked in for Leviathans, making sure to very early on in the draft grab one of their mid lane picks.
Wonder if Baba Yaga might enter the battlegrounds here for the Camelot Kings. It's not something that they'll necessarily have to prioritize, given that they already know it's going to be Morgan Le Fay here for Shinto. So that, I think, complemented with the Fafnir. So a lot of burst damage, I think, in response to this Izanami Gilgamesh. But more importantly, I think it's really just the disengage tools that I think the Leviathans have opted for here. It can be a little bit awkward, though, with the Osiris, because if you're looking for mostly disengage against the likes of a Gilgamesh Izanami, you want to make sure that you've left something over for after the fact, and I'm not sold that the Osiris will be able to do it alone.
We do see Hera locked in for the Kings, and that's been Dardes and Big Man Ting specifically. I believe they're the only two who have been playing this goddess in mid lane. So that one will be locked away. So no, unfortunately, we won't see the Baba Yaga. As much as fun as I love watching Baba Yaga be played, it will be the Hera indeed. Funny thing to note, we saw nothing but Osiris highlights for Captain Twig, but it's going to be Panatom playing it. And we saw nothing but Gilgamesh highlights for Panatom. It'll be Captain Twig playing, doing a little bit of a god reversal, but it was to be expected, honestly. These are two of the hottest picks for both of these players, and Leviathans recognizing to kind of take Twig out of the hot seat immediately.
I don't think Kings believe that this Osiris is going to be for the jungle. I'm not sure that I believe it really all that much either, just because of the fact, that they ban away the Daji. I think that Daji could be a really interesting god pick if she ever does get through. She's definitely a strong response against the likes of a Hera, because she's one of the few gods that I think can actually harass Hera and stick to her. A lot of other assassins, I think, really struggle with that polymorph on top of the Argus, and the movement speed as well from her Divine Shroud can be incredibly annoying. So for the Leviathans, it's classic. Support bans, genetics. We're going to make you play something different. Xing Ten, I think, has been a relatively popular one for the Kings. Khepri could also be another really strong asset here, just because the Leviathans do have a lot of single target focus right now. But again, it's just the Kings seem to be really trying to rein in on all of this early game pressure.
Name a better duo than Genetics and having his supports banned away no matter what phase of this game it is. Genetics has to dig a little bit deeper into the god pool. There is Hercules locked in on the tail end of the bans, which was a Cucullin and a Daji. As you mentioned previously, the Daji taking a shot for the jungle, the Cucullin taking a shot at hardcore, which this has kind of been his go-to default god. It was considered a crutch at the very beginning. You go back to solo, you get a nice and simple god to play, but he's made it look like a monstrous solo lane pick. Alongside, however, we will see the Cerberus locked in going over so it will be Osiris in the jungle.
I think the Kings might have just put the pressure onto the Leviathans there that, hey, if you were toying with the idea of Yarkor having to play this Osiris, or, wanting to get a more ideal jungle assassin type pick for Panethum, now that's going to be put to the test here, because Cerberus, I think, is always a strong match in the solo lane to try and fare against, but with how much Cerberus variety has been playing, I'm sure you probably know better than anyone how to try and handle that god.
What was it? I think it was a Twitter meme that got put out, which was, the old reliable. It was just Zapman with Heimdall, so he's going to be able to lock that in for the Leviathans game number 1. Meanwhile, the Kings will respond with a Khepri as Genetics digs a little deep into the god pool. Not super far like we've seen before, where he's had to go 5, 6, 7 gods deep to grab a pick. Instead, it'll be Khepri, who we talked, the desk in set 1 talked a lot about it, how Khepri has just kind of come back out of nowhere, just a resurgence of this Guardian. But so far with the play from it, Genetics has been basically not having to ult against some matchups for it. We've seen a game where he didn't use the ult at all. We saw a game where he only used it maybe one time for it.
Well, I think it was both sets against Valkyries, if I'm not mistaken.
It may have been. I think one of them was the Valkyries matchup, so it was a little bit difficult for them. But against the Leviathans, I can only imagine we're going to be seeing multiple Scarab's Blessings. Maybe just because, especially if we see a case of like Season 0 Zapman, where he's just, guys, dive that Phoenix right now, give me that Salt, those Blessings, I got to go in.
No shot we see that. I don't think Zapman's going to be running it down like that anytime soon. Haven't seen it from him in a hot while,
That's
and
fair.
I don't think it's going to change around here, especially not with this Heimdall versus Izanami matchup. But that's where I think the Khepri is an even better pickup here for the Kings, because, like I just touched on, really good against that single target focus, and that is pretty much everything that the Leviathans have opted for. Granted, there are some decent reinitiation tools, I think, surrounding the Cerberus, Fafnir, and Osiris, but how feasible it's going to be for Zapman and Shinto to reliably find the follow-up, it's going to be tough.
It's going to be a tough one indeed for them. Leviathans need this win to push themselves closer to the top seed. Can they do it, or will the Kings shut them out? We're going to take it to Dulcin and Goremizer to find out.
This is a good one. This matchup somehow gets beaten out for match of the week. Well, because there's another good one tomorrow. But 2 top 4 teams going toe-to-toe. Standings for the Phase 2 playoffs. Ever so important. And all of that and more on the line here between the Leviathans and the Camelot Kings. My name is Dulcin. Goremizer's with me. And Doug will be bringing us the views. And Gore, how much fun are we about to have? Hopefully a lot. Hopefully not no fun. Hopefully this is a lot of fun, because the potential for fun at an all-time high.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. It's the, second Leviathans cast I think I've had this week. And I just like watching this team play, man. I love watching the front line. J-Mac, that was my meme that he references, didn't even credit me. Go follow me on Twitter for all the stats and memes. It was up there at Gormizer. Blah, 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 blah. No, I'm just excited for this one. I think it's actually a very, very fun matchup just in general because we have what feels like two unstoppable front lines taking each other on. And I think a lot of the difference is actually over there on the right-hand side. It's going to be Hardcore up against Variety to maybe make the biggest difference. Genetics and Wrong U are so phenomenal at their role. I think it's going to come down to solo lane presence.
And two solo laners, Gore, that have seen a rise in play over recent matchups, right? This Hercules has become a lot more popular. Cerberus as well just feels like it's in every single game, whether it's picked or banned. And we can see the type of damage numbers that pick likes to put out. It's all about surviving in this lane, isn't it? When you're up against Variety, when you're on the Hercules, that's going to be doing a lot of this. It's all about surviving. Luckily, when you're under your own Tier 1 tower, the threat of a push-pull combo underneath the Hercules' tower is somewhat mitigated here. Mid-lane matchup could be fun, but not if your big man Ting sends some damage right back towards Pentatom with the body blocks. Perfect! And Shinto on the board first.
I mean, a great shot from Shinto to get that burst damage, but just brilliant body blocks from Panatom to make sure you can't get to safety. Look, that was the biggest problem. A lot of these teams, when they've been playing up against the Kings, specifically up against Tings himself, it has been difficult to kill the mid laner. If you can shut him down early, I think that's a good avenue to success, especially considering one of your best avenues to success has been Shinto. Highest KDA on this team pretty much all year, bouncing around the top of the league for a majority of it as well.
And especially when the enemy mid laner is Hera, and she's immobile and doesn't have much to work with at level 2 here in this game. So no beads now for big man Tings. Immobile and does not have Argus for another couple levels. BMT's got a ward and play safe for the next little bit of time, at least the next 104 seconds, because those beads pivotal in avoiding that same outcome from being reached yet again. But you could, I think, Gore, say similar things about this Morgan Le Fay, right? I mean, there's still the opportunity, a little more self-peel maybe. I don't know, polymorph versus the knock-up for Morgan Le Fay.
Part 2?
Worth talking about, yeah, right. A little more obvious, Panatom walks it down. But I think the things we're saying about Big Man Tings and his vulnerability, and that vulnerability now culminating as a red buff attempt, but BMT secures his own red buff, so thumbs up from BMT on that. What I'm trying to say, that I keep getting interrupted by the players on, is that Shinto could be under threat for some mid lane ganks as well.
Yeah, not necessarily the most survivable pick either, as compared to, I guess Giannis is the most survivable mage since he can walk through walls. Maybe that can come down. Raiden's been doing a lot more getting away than Giannis has been lately. There's a lot of good self-peelable and dashable away mages.
You got my wheels turning here.
Yeah, trying to figure out who is more safe than these two. Both of these mages are a little more susceptible. Morgan Le Fay definitely a little less susceptible. The shield for Tings is helpful, and Argus as a whole is helpful for Peel. But Morgan Le Fay has enough CC to make sure, and let's face it, also enough damage to make sure that you're going to have trouble chasing her down. So Shinto may be off to a better edge, but that's where the junglers come in. Panatom, Osiris, very solid jungler, good damage. Gilgamesh has a little bit more setup and maybe a little more stun, so Shinto caught out by that, might be able to get taken down a little easier.
Argus is here for Big Man Tings. He's going to drop it onto Panatom. The stun does connect on BMT. 5 seconds away from beads is Big Man Tings. Won't have to use them this time. Captain Twig could have reinitiated. But Panatom, whether that is timer control or what, Panatom was kind of time perfect on that gank onto BMT. So now Argus will be down for the next little bit of time. This continued mounting pressure on Big Man Tings has now netted Shinto not only first blood, but about a 1-level lead.
I mean, that is exactly the glory that you would want. Shinto getting ahead. You've got your duo lane doing mostly fine. I think Rongyu was actually the last one to tick over to 5. This has been a surprise to me that this has been a little more quiet. I think this has been a great duo lane, although Netroid did just mess up. I believe it was, his 6 games in a row on ROM that he had up to this point, now the Izanami. But Genetics has been playing a really, really solid Khepri lately, to the point where, as the desk had mentioned, and we've kind of been talking about the last couple of weeks, you ban out so much, and he still gets a god that he has, I believe, 100% win rate with, right? I mean, it's just been so clean from this duo lane on the Kings that it feels hard to vote I want to say 4 or against them here, just in the duo lane matchup. We'll see, I guess, as that pivots towards the late game, what they're able to provide as the team becomes a whole unit.
We're going to hit a quick pause on the game here in game number 1 before we jump back into things and see how things build up. But you can already get kind of a mindset, or you can have a pulse on the mindset of the Camelot Kings here, or the Leviathans rather. It's putting pressure early in this game on big man Tings. One was a successful gank for First Blood, and then Panatom just kind of walks into lane a couple of times. Now, though, with that Argus score, maybe a little bit more survivability on that Hera, so it's going to take a little extra to get those kills.
Yeah, and you're going to have a decent shield at this point as well, so more difficult to get the lockdown, but you've seen the beads already get burned a couple of times, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that aggression at least show up. Argus, any time and every time it gets burned down, is going to be worthwhile. About to come off cooldown, and that is going to be a rough matchup, I think, as long as it continues going that way.
Oh no, Zapman was just going to ward. He does get a perfect ultimate onto the gank, but now he's still got 2 running him down. Will Genetics hit the root? He's scared, blessing himself, but Zapman won't get rooted. Instead, now it's Lord of the Afterlife from Panatom, up and over, in the re-engage from the Leviathans, and here is it, and it is swift. Genetics survives, but Captain Twig, the re-engage on Zapman, won't be enough either.
I just love the re-engage so far from the
Gotta be a kill
Leviathans.
here,
Just out of range, Twig has to die.
Gotta be a kill, and it is. The Leviathans, and it's Panatom who gets it onto Captain Twig finally. Wow, that was a bit of a ping pong, wasn't it, Gore? Lots of back and forth there on that one. I loved the mindset from Genetics. I'm going to Scarab's Blessing myself. Let's see what happens.
That move
Let's
speed.
roll in, get the move speed, see if we can get the root, and then just a little bit short. And the Leviathan's able to re-gank, re-turn things around, and they net themselves another kill.
I'm 100% on board with the use my Scarab's Blessing, give me move speed, I'm going to chase you down. It's one of my favorite aspects of it because it makes the ult, whenever you're going for a save, still feel a little more worthwhile if you're able to connect it. Yeah, maybe the ult doesn't proc, but you gave them the move speed to get them out of there. And then immediately you see Genetics' health bar drop incredibly low, you see Twig's health bar drop low, and the first thing I think is, you know what would be really nice right about now? Maybe a Scarab's Blessing, something like that. It's just an unfortunate scenario that the Leviathans are able to turn it around so heavily.
And so the Leviathans off to a great start here this game. They find themselves 1,000 gold in the lead over the Camelot Kings. And so you got to look at how the levels start to translate from that. Luckily for big man Tings, despite a lot of the early pressure, hasn't fallen that far behind. Now gets Chronos Pendant here, Gore. A bit of a different start from what we're used to seeing on the mid laners. But still a good look, though, for big man Tings, as we will take another deep breath here. Or Gore and I will take a deep breath, but we're going to stick right on in the game here. And so mid lane, Gore, where a lot of the focus has been, I think I keep a lot of focus there as well, because Shinto hasn't been under the same pressure. Now is really building up that Warlock staff, a kill and an assist as well. So this Morgan Le Fay, something to be worried about.
Yeah, again, just the damage numbers that Morgan Le Fay has in the middle of a team fight is going to be solid. And you put that with Fafnir CC, maybe not the heaviest CC that you're going to have in the game, but still good. And of course you have the Cerberus later on, a stun, as well as such a massive ult that is going to just set up for free most of the damage I think Shinto is going to be able to get. That's going to burn a lot of beads. And that puts a little bit more pressure on the rest of the Leviathans, just to make sure that Yarkor could maybe land something like that.
Yep.
Though Zap has a lot of self-peel, Shinto has some self-peel. I think the carries are going to be just so hard to kill, Dave. It's just going to be so hard this game.
Right, I mean, Neptruoid on Iza is hard enough to kill anyway, just by nature of silence.
Tings might be
dash.
the easiest to kill, and that's not saying much. Hera's not that easy to dive into.
Right, like in a vacuum, absolutely. But then you throw Genetics into the mix, and the Scarab's Blessing could find its way in. The Kings are going to be a difficult team to kill, especially if Genetics is on point throughout this game with those ultimates. Zapman, though, on his own, able to do so as well. I think the extra spice factor here for Rongyu is that Coerce, and by the time Zapman gets a little bit later on in the game here, that Coerce is just going to let this Heimdall tee off. And if the Camelot Kings can't find their way onto Zap or Shinto, and we know how safe Shinto likes to play, it's going to be a tough road for the Camelot Kings. So we're not quite 10 minutes into this game where we haven't seen much from Twig yet. A death over there on the left side of the map, but still in the realm of power with the way that the build has gone, that he can make some stuff happen here early.
Yeah, it was a large skirmish that didn't result in anything. Now in mid, though, Rongyu's the one getting aggressive. That's kind of the initiator, right? I think both Genetics and Rongyu are capable of starting pretty much any fight they want. But the problem is either if your CC gets, immuned out, whether it's beads or something else, or if you're just off the mark with it, then you're not going to be able to have the follow-up. It's not going to matter, if Shinto and Panatom are ready, or if Twig and Tings are ready to make the jump. They're just going to be able to walk away. And that's what we saw in the duo lane. I think that's what we saw there in the mid lane. But I like that they're keeping active on it. Rongyu is not letting it go to pass.
We've seen this story before, Gordon. His big man Tings just jumped on, but this time Tings has got the ultimate, and he's also got a Scarab's Blessing, so it's a second lease on life for the hair in the mid lane, and a beautiful drop kick from Captain Twig sends Rongyu beneath the tier 1 tower, and Panatom jumps in all on his own. Argus still running around. No, Zapman took the roundabout route, and this should be a kill onto big man Tings when he crashes back down, and it sure is. It's a gank from Zapman, and the Leviathans have their third.
What a rotation, and even more, what a Bifrost Crystal. Genetics does what he can to keep him there. I'm going to throw my abilities out, I'm going to root you, I'm going to pull you, but at the end of the day, Zap just goes, peace. It's literally the meme, throwing up the peace sign, disappears, gets a kill, and gets out. I mean, that is a good rotation. And admittedly, it's not something we see the Bifrost used for often. The longer those crystals, or the further apart those crystals are, the longer on cooldown it will be. And so typically, making a dash like that is actually going to be a little detrimental for you, at least in your safety. And that's why we don't see him use that often. But when you are able to use it that way, that is a really, really good pickup for him. It's 3-0. I wouldn't have anticipated the Leviathans being able to really drive the pace this hard.
Although the Camelot Kings definitely a team that are okay with slower-paced games and then really rolling things up by the time the mid-game rolls around. We've seen the Camelot Kings in this type of environment, in this type of game, that they've ended up turning around and winning big before. So we are far from over here, despite a pretty healthy gold lead here for the Leviathans, 2,500 or so is what they have. And Gore, here's the good news for the Leviathans. The kills are kind of where you want them, right? You want them on the jungle, you want them on your mid laner, that 3v3 in the mid feeling better when the jungle and the mid laner have a little extra gold, a little extra experience. And then Zapman as well. Now he feels a little bit better in that lane up against Netrioid on the Izanami. Mirrored builds there, if you're kind of talking about potential 1v1s as far as the first two items go. Zapman thinking about a little bit of crit here, Gore. And we started to see some variety here in these hunter builds, and crit after a few bows has definitely been one of them.
I have a lot of fun facts that are bouncing around in my head, and I almost gave away an answer for a trivia question on Monday just because it revolves around crit. Yeah. So I am Are
these guys, who's doing? Well, I don't know.
I'm going to have to pocket. Well, so the question that is going to be asked, and you can think about it, actually, the Pyromancer, is going to save me.
It's low, and the Camelot Kings secure the Pyro. Argus running around looking for a target, won't find one. And so Camelot Kings get a bit of a break here in this game. Pyromancer secured, and then we're all going to back away from that.
And they needed that gold. I mean, look at it. It's still hovering around 2,500. That is difficult to overcome, but not unheard of. I mean, it's only 13 minutes in. Once you have the Pyromancer, you get a Gold Fury, it's going to level out pretty easily, and that is a good pickup for them. You get something that not only gets you back into the fights, but it feels like the first true win that the Kings have gotten. They haven't necessarily been losing a whole ton. It's just been single picks up to this point, but that is something that they can really hang their hat on, and that's typically where their pivots has been. This is not a team that cares much about the first 15 minutes of any match that they're playing. Granted, they don't want it to get completely out of hand. They're not going to feed their brains out. But once it hits 15 minutes, that's where they buckle down and really start to make you play a different game of Smite. That's where they group up. That's where they level up. That's typically what we've seen out of Leviathans as well, which makes me even more excited for these late-game 5-on-5s. Because both of these teams are just really phenomenal at playing late-game Smite.
Right, I'm excited, Gore, for very similar things, and maybe in the shorter term when these solo laners finally start to get involved, because the way that the Cerberus and the Hercules can change around to fight, definitely something to be looked after. Captain Twig jumps in, attempts to steal away the Oracles. We split them here, so neither team grab the early Oracles for themselves around that Gold Fury. And so then you have to look, Gore, towards the Gold Fury, the potential for teams to start them up, fight them away. Usually you look at the jungle there. Panatom and Zapman definitely can work it down. Captain Twig and Netrioid have the ability as well. Netrioid going a little bit standard. Now that we've seen the third completed hunter build, or the third completed hunter item for both, excuse me. Silver Branch, standard from what we've seen, and exactly what you expect, I think, on the Izanami. Tainted Steel a little bit different as far as starter item goes. But then it is the rage for Zapman on this Heimdall.
Yeah, I believe similar to what Stuart was building the other day, right? I think it's something that Zap has been playing around with as well on stream, and to kind of keep your eyes on specifically him. Crit is good, at least it has been back and hovering around, and on Heimdall, you're not necessarily swinging the fastest of everybody in the Hunters, right? When you look at Silver Branch Bow and what it's been bringing, Heimdall doesn't really stand out to me as like the top tier, right? That there's a reason Artemis and Rom are up there. Their attack speed, their stims really play into that passive. Heimdall throws slow. That's just kind of one of his things. He's got an attack chain that comes in. Crit has been really good for him throughout the years, though, that he's been out and that he's been played, because you get some really massive damage numbers on that third really large hit, to the point where we've seen, 1400s, 1500s, 1000 damage thrown out by him. And that's exactly what I expect to see. I wouldn't be surprised with a Wind Demon potentially getting picked up, but definitely things like a Deathbringer that just slot in well with the rest of the crit build.
Zapman's going to hope for some crits on this Gold Fury as the Leviathans have started up the first Fury of the game. The Camelot Kings are close by to answer. He takes a polymorph, and as such, half of his health is missing, and then he's rooted in place, and then Argus is there. Wrongu was not allowed to play, and the Camelot Kings take the Gold Fury down as well. Now, Gore, inching ever so close to being back to even.
It's not just the damage that Wronghu takes, it's where he takes it. That Gold Fury just sticks to him. And the entire time it's taking damage. These oboe procs that are bouncing back and forth are lowering the Gold Fury health. It's getting taken down so slightly to the point where the Leviathans who start that serve it up to the Kings on a silver platter once Wronghu dies. It was a really good engage for the Kings to step forward with. And like you said, inching ever so closer to that even mark. And that's where things get a little more hectic. You get 2 good kills on the Kings, but how often are you able to get back there? That's one of the biggest question marks when trying to take on the Kings is can you kill off the mid laner? Variety hasn't been a part of these fights. Neither is Hardcore, so we can't really evaluate the soul laners, but all of a sudden you start adding Hercules displacement into this? I don't know. It becomes a different team fight. And that's going to be the next few minutes.
And remember, it's something we've talked about, and it's something we always talk about with the Camelot Kings, and it's that this type of pace is really in their wheelhouse. Not that it's not in the Leviathans' wheelhouse either, remember, because this is a team, when we sat down with them for their media day, we talked about late game. That was the buzzword or the buzz phrase surrounding this team last year being Sangam, but the same roster. Late game was the buzz phrase for you guys. How much weight do you put in that? And they answered, and they were kind of like, yeah. I mean, I think it holds some weight. We were very late game centric last year, and we've added some variety to the ways we can win these games. No varieties on the other team. You're right. There's a drop kick, though, that's connected onto Shinto here in the mid lane, who will have to use the beads, but he'll walk away. Panatom is in as a re-initiation for the Leviathans, and there's a lot of damage connecting onto Twig, who will use the beads. And so he'll walk away. For the time being, Gore, just beads and beads on either side.
Well, Panatom used the up-down for the ult. He gets his passive going. Great. Player-made walls. He's going to walk right through them. But not much else that's going to go for him. I didn't see it connect. And so he didn't get the damage that he would have liked or the passive that he would have liked out there, that anti-heal that it can apply. And the Kings get to walk away scot-free. And like you said, beads for beads, you have a couple pairs down technically on the side of the Kings. Genetics is about to have his comeback. But that ult being down makes it just a little more favorable, I would argue, for the Leviathans. No, for the Kings here, just because they got something big out of Panatom. Granted, Winds of Shamash were also used.
Also used, of course, on the other side. Shinto held on to his ult, and that's important to look at with this Morgan Le Fay as well. Yes, there are no beads, so you're thinking, Dave, why don't the Camelot Kings just go right on to mid lane? Shinto, we've talked about the immobility, maybe easy to gank. Oh, well, with the self-peel and the knock-up and the ultimate, you can definitely get yourself out of some sticky situations. So, definitely susceptible without the beads, but not a surefire kill for the Camelot Kings. Pyromancer's respawn here. Primal Fury still a couple minutes away. And so that's why you see both teams starting to rotate here towards the right. And with a fight maybe brewing around this Pyro Gore, we could see the solo laners getting involved for the first time.
In the Pyromancer, it's one of the better objectives if you end up losing it, just because it's not going to be a huge swing. But when you are this even in gold, and I'm talking 200 gold separating these two teams, it's not something you want to be losing or giving up. And so it is pressure from the Leviathans in this area, Dave, that's nice. But this is where Secure comes into the equation, and specifically where Argus comes into the equation because he provides another huge body for the Kings.
It's like a second person in the fight.
Yeah,
Sixth person. That's the word I'm looking
sixth
for.
person. There it is. That really causes a lot of trouble for people. The big drop down is incredibly solid as well. That's, I think, the big impact. And there's some good secure on the side of the Leviathans you might be able to see, but nothing that's going to be, writing home about.
Pyromancer down to half HP. The Leviathans want this one, but the Kings are going to be close by to try to steal it away. Variety has his ult. Sometimes the big old boulder can be used to secure some of these objectives, so it's not an afterthought for the Leviathans. They've got to secure this one themselves, and they do so, but now Variety starting to walk forward as the Leviathans walk back. The Kings want a fight. The Leviathans do not want to fight. They've gotten the objective, and they want to get out alive, and they're able to do so.
I mean, that's pretty much the goal, right? If you don't think you're going to be able to overwhelmingly win the team fight, might as well just grab the objective, get out of there, play clean smite, and that's what they do. They get the neutral win, and that's all you need. You don't need to stay. Anything else is going to be a risk, and that is where the risk is. The displacement from Variety.
That was close.
At this point, it's just a hair to the left there. All of a sudden, we're in the middle of a fight again.
All of a sudden, Rongi's got to use his ult, and the collapse from the Kings is there. So it's looking like a tier 1 tower siege here. We're 21 minutes into the game. No towers have fallen yet, except for one on the left and one on the right. Instead, we're going to do an old-fashioned brawl in the mid lane, and Panatom is the one targeted first. Argus not there for the immediate knock-up follow-up at the front line of the Leviathans. A little bit low on the health bars. The Camelot Kings now able to take advantage of that, push themselves forward. Tier 1 tower taking a lot of damage, and also taken down.
They come in, and admittedly, it's not a lot of gold. It's pressure, though. When you don't have that tier 1 to fall back on, me and Mifflin were talking about this a little bit yesterday, just how much that gives you as a zone of safety. Granted, you're also missing a tier 1 on left. So realistically, this left side of the jungle, not just the Fury, but your red buff, your purple buff, aren't as safe. The Kings can walk forward, and as long as they're feeling confident enough to take the fight, they can force you to feel very awkward or to just forfeit a lot of your experience in the jungle. It also opens up the conversation for that Pyromancer, maybe even a Scorpion invade there on the right-hand side where the Leviathans just had their spawn in, just to keep the conversation going for the Kings and to start farming things up. Ultimately, after all of this, though, Dave, it still is a neutral game.
Yeah, we thought 200 gold was close. We are at like 20 right now is the difference between the Kings and the Leviathans. So then you look towards XP. And Gore, outside of one level, and it might even be a half level, that Panatom is up over Captain Twig, and it is a half level as Captain Twig is now caught up. Literally nothing in the XP department either. That could change here in this fight. Big Man Tings uses Argus, and then it's a pushback from Variety to get Wrong You out of the fight. After the Leviathans get disengaged here, Gore, that's probably feeling pretty good. A lot of self-peel in that Argus, a lot of damage in that Argus, disruption, and that's now off the map.
And this is kind of the hectic nature, I think, of these two teams. A lot of setup, a lot of capabilities, a lot of follow-through. I mean, you can see Wrong You's health bar is not happy after that, but it's going to be the follow-up, the CC, where they actually get the kills. Will they actually get the fight started? The answer's been no for a lot of it, whether it's the Leviathans engaging or the Kings. And so I think even more credence to a Fire Giant fight. And with the way this is going, Dave, it's either going to be a full fight, we get 3 or we get 1, and that's how we win this, or it's going to be a sneak. It's going to be a we just had better positioning, we warded better than you, had better vision, we're able to retaliate better and got a Fire Giant because you just weren't able to get anything done for it. And looking at the ward coverage right now from the Kings, a lot around mid, a little bit in the Fire Giant pit. I'm starting to think the latter might be a little more likely.
Yep. And you know what kind of feels bad? You look towards the Hunter build score, and that's something we've kept tabs on throughout this entire game. Around this moment in the game, you're 24 minutes in, that's when you start to talk about late game comps, how item builds start to look, things like that. Both Hunters have gone with different mindsets. Netroid's build is going to shred health. I mean, my goodness, the way that build has built up. Any of these front lines work their way in. This Izanami is going to have an absolute field day. You could say the same about Zatman, Gore, and I think it still holds some value. There's 3 Spectral Armors on the Camelot Kings. Literally every frontliner that wants to buy that item has bought one. And so Zatman, not going to say countered. I mean, the crits are still going to be there, and they're still going to hurt a little extra. But Spectral is a pretty big value here in eliminating a lot of the damage that Zapman's going to be able to provide.
And I think that does isolate where Zap's like ideal targets are. The crit versus Tings or the crit versus Netroid will just blow them up. He only needs 2 to 3 hits to be able to get rid of them. It's going to be 5 to 6 to 7 hits all of a sudden on the front lines, though. And with Twig picking it up, that's where I think the line kind of gets drawn in the sand. Zap needs the setup for his team to get back there, or he's going to have to figure something out how to deal that. Because, as you had mentioned, the protections being picked up, and specifically those spectral armors being picked up for the Kings, makes it a lot more difficult to burn through genetics, Twig, variety, and Shinto can do a lot of damage. Zap can still do a lot of damage in combination. They'll be deadly, but it might not be enough. That was 103 crit versus the 400 plus he was hitting earlier.
Yeah, Variety's health, you have to. The health that's missing looks like one of the ticks on his health bar right now with how little he's taken from Zapman. And so Pyromancer is up. When you are this even in the game, 25 minutes in, Fire Giant is ever so important. Pyromancer, yes, but a little less so. Variety drives on through, but instead he's taking a lot of damage in return. Captain Twig will leap away. Panatom's got a lot in the tethers right now. Is he going to get us done? Yes, he will. It's on to Genetics. Oh, but it's a big ultimate from Big Man Tings to turn this fight around, send the Leviathans right back.
And there's a good dropkick. Shinto almost caught
nice
out, but he
knock-up.
gets saved.
And he saves himself a bit there, I think. The knock-up then pushes the Camelot Kings back. So you got to take a quick look on either side of the screen where those ultimates are. Now the Camelot Kings a little worse off in that category as the Leviathans re-engage. The grouping from the Camelot Kings, though, strength in numbers might be enough to keep the Leviathans at bay. And somehow all 10 players are alive.
The thing about this crit, while it might not kill off Variety, let's say Genetics or Captain Twig incredibly fast, you know what will kill incredibly fast? Something like a Fire Giant could get burned by Zap. And just Yarkor, maybe just Wrong Use, someone plus Zapman to help tank it up, should be enough to be able to scoop that and keep it under the control of the Leviathans. And that's where things get important. You get a Pyromancer if you're the Kings there, and you're still just slightly behind on gold with the way the Leviathans have been playing. You get a lot of good control
And
if
some
you're the
beads.
Kings there. And some beats, a lot of beats actually, and yet it's still the Leviathans that were able to turn that fight around. I expect them to put up a fight here.
The Kings use their ults first in that skirmish. That means they get him back first here. Fire Giant low, and Fire Giant secured by the Camelot Kings. Panatom was there to try to steal it away. He will be unable to do so. And it looks like this one will fizzle out. It's a bit of an understatement. The Kings grab away a Fire Giant convincingly, but there's no fight after.
Remember that thing I said, was that 5 minutes ago? I don't know how long ago it was, about the wards, the coverage, and how the fight wasn't going to be a fight.
Sure.
It was going to
Call
be
it 5 minutes,
the
yeah.
vision that they had. Look at all of the wards on the right-hand side. I see a single blue ward just near where Totemoku would spawn, and then a blue sentry ward just on that entrance, the king side entrance to
Oh no! Oh, they don't
man.
even get the Primal Fury. The Leviathans do 99.9% of the damage. And Captain Twig does the last 0.1%, and now this Fire Giant siege can begin. Be careful, Twig. That's a late game. Morgan Le Fay and Shinto makes Captain Twig pay. One Fire Giant buff stripped away.
Only props he has is to deal with Zapman, not to deal with Shinto, and now they're getting even more aggressive. He's taking a lot.
There's a lot of cleave damage making its way into the Leviathan's draft here as well. Lord of the Afterlife re-pushes back into the Camelot Kings here. And we will take a deep breath. -1 Captain Twig. And Gore, how much of the Fire Giant buff that rips away is going to be very important to look after. Still, decent amount of towers on the Leviathan side of the map.
It might just be tower presence, though, that strips away, right? Your ability to get a Phoenix, well, it's 20 seconds away at minimum while you wait for Twig to get back. Your ability to get a tower, even, feels like it was completely shot down, at least for the waiting period, which is good news, again, for the Kings, because now, or I should say, for the Leviathans, because now you're burning that Fire Giant timer as deep as you can. You're making sure that 4 minutes they have to play with where the power play is effective for them isn't going to be as big of a swing in their favor. And your map state is mirrored. I mean, they've got the one tier 2 in left, you've got one tier 2, or tier 1 in right, and that is the only tier 1 still standing. They're the only towers that really separate these two teams. And if the Kings are able to get the run they should with a Fire Giant, that should start to swing a gold lead. Finally, maybe the first true gold lead we've gotten. And I can finally amend my statement. I can argue that the Kings didn't care about 27 minutes of gameplay this time around. 25 maybe is the mark, because they were just waiting and waiting and waiting before they get that FG. This should be a push to finally give them something of a lead.
Right, and that's where you see the tower pressure starting to roll in. Zapman has been a topic of conversation here this game. He's got 4,400 damage compared to the 14,000 that Netroid has been able to do. Whether that's build, whether that's circumstance, Definitely up for debate, but 3 Spectral Armors against crit definitely is not helping his cause. Titan's Bane will finalize the build here, so some percent pen and some power on the end of things here is going to feel good, right? You're diversifying your damage path just a little bit if you're Zapman, and that's always going to be a good thing. Wrongyu's got to be careful here. A root into a polymorph, into a knockup, into a drop kick. There's a lot of chain CC that can be applied here by the Camelot Kings if the Leviathan step too far forward. One of those pieces of CC gets used onto Panatom in the back. Another gets used onto Yarkor here into the mid. So a soft defense being put in by the Leviathans, but there's no surge of engage yet from the Camelot Kings.
I mean, the damage, though, you can see is finally there, not just from Shinto, but Zap finally showing up and getting something done.
What happened to Zapman? Is Argus just chasing him down, and then Captain Twig does the last bit of damage? He's on the opposite side of the fight, but it doesn't matter. The Camelot Kings found a way to reach him, and here come the Kings barreling down the mid lane here. There's still a Phoenix they've got to worry about, and so they'll turn back, they'll deal with the Phoenix, and they'll send the Leviathans running back to Fountain.
2 towers and 4 Leviathans still standing. Not enough to make me feel confident running into a Titan room at this point. And of course, a lot of gold that's still going to be available for him on the map. And of course, the timer for this Fire Giant should be starting to wear off in the next few seconds.
Good time to go back and buy. 3,000 gold for BMT, all the way down to 2K for Netrioid, and then Genetics gets a nice little boost from that Pyromancer. So this is actually perfect timing for the Kings. You get done what you want to get done. All the towers except for the right side. Phoenix in the mid lane and a Pyromancer. You've got a whole heap of gold to go back and spend right on time for the FG to spawn. There will be an Oni Fury spawning at a similar time to the Fire Giant. They'll be just desynced a little bit. And so there is, if the Leviathans don't go or want to fight for this one, it's enhanced, by the way, I think you might have to. You could go for the Oni Fury if that's another avenue into this game, but I don't know if you can let an enhanced Fire Giant go quietly.
No, not the way that last Fire Giant went quietly, right? Where it's just, and again, a battle of skirmishes, whether it's vision and the control that you have, or just unfortunate backs from the Leviathans, that is what granted the Kings their capability. I do think the damage is there for the Leviathans to try and do something very similar to what the Kings just did. The problem is just the Kings haven't opened up that positioning for the Leviathans to be in to try and capitalize on it. Now with the Fire Giant spawned, you've got Tings and Netroid. They could very well back off and just DPS it.
Gore, the Kings have 2 kills, and they are 6,000 gold in the lead off of 2 kills. One of them on a Zapman, one of them on the Wrongu at like the beginning of the game. All of this built up just by pressure, just by presence for the Camelot Kings. Unfortunately, the Leviathans can't be slowed down by presence, by pressure for the entire game. You've got to show some face around this FG. But there are fire minions working their way into the mid lane. So that's going to have to be dealt with. Zapman's the one who draws that card. You can see the Camelot Kings immediately reply. Onto the Fire Giant they go. Zapman has not dealt with the fire minions because a fight is brewing. But the Leviathans buy some more time for their Hunter to get into the fight. Variety gets stunned on through here from Yarkor. They're on a knife edge here, Gord. Just waiting for that jump in.
I mean, this is where the damage specifically from Tings and Netroid is going to come in handy. I mean, look at it. They started the FG. It's already at half health.
Yeah, that's
that
fast.
means there's more pressure on the Leviathans, but they're more present this time around to get in there.
Wow, Variety's taking a lot of damage here. Argus has found its way onto Zapman. Zapman has just not been able to play. Variety sends the boulder his direction, but Zapman lives on. Panatom, he's taking a fight that he can't win, and Big Man Tings thanks him for it. Camelot Kings, they'll find the first one. Zapman crystals on away as Variety's got the Scarab's blessing on himself as he rounds the right-hand side of this fight. Wrongu in full-on retreat. Yarkor re-engages. Netroid finally finished off Zap.
And now it's Shinto, the last one standing forward. Is the DPS is gone, and they're going to kill him off.
Gore, I think this might just be the game here. Argus is going to deal the last bit of damage, and it's one lone Wrongu against the world. The Camelot Kings had 2 kills until 34 minutes. And they'll get 4 kills in one team fight, and they'll get the win as well.
And they don't even need the FG this time around. And look, the Titan took so much damage from the fire minions as well, starting this at around half health as they walk into it. That just goes to show, again, these late game teams and how much it's going to affect them. The Kings have been very, very good at this style of play. Yep. They don't care too much about the first 20 minutes. 25 minutes is what I would amend it for that exact game, where they just, okay, cool, we're losing a couple kills. It was like 4-1 for a longest time. They get a single kill onto Zap, but they snuck a Fire Giant without having to win some massive fight. It's just ward control as well as your ability to zone, your capabilities to poke out the Leviathans there that really pushed them beyond the edge.
I don't know what Zapman like did to the Kings or whatever, but he was just getting piled
Existed.
on all game. Argus was chasing him down. All of the pressure from the Kings was on to this Heimdall. He just couldn't play. It just felt like Zapman couldn't play here. And the Leviathans, they go down early. The Camelot Kings in traditional Kings playstyle take game number 1. Can the adjustments take their effect for the Leviathans? Got to stick around and find out. Game 2 up next.
Meet the cereal kids are crazy for, Cthulhu. Start your morning madness with a bowl of morning happiness.
Cthulhu sale is ongoing now. You will take part. Save up to 33% off gem bundles. You will take part.
Crazy crispity, crazy crunchity, crazy
Select chests up to 50% off. You will take part. Boosters, avatars, wards, and more up to 50% off. You will take part. Party up with up to 3 times favor. Worshippers and XP. You will take part. This is your duty.
Crazy Cthulhu-y, Cthulhu. Surgeon General's warning, Cthulhu's are not of this world and should not be ingested by children or adults over the age of 80. Gems are not included as a prize because Cthulhu's are not real. Reality is meaningless, time is a construct. Abandon all hope when you ingest Cthulhu's. Use as directed, part of balanced breakfast. For the crispity, crunchity, crazy crunch, get cuckoo with Cthulhu.
You will take part.
Of a balanced breakfast.
Can we take a commercial break?
I'll be taking part. Hopefully you'll take part in picking yourself up some gems. We got a huge gem sale coming up recently thanks to our fun ad with the Cthulhu. So get yourself some cereal, get yourself some gems. August 20th through September 6th, there will be gems on sale, as it said, up to 33% off of some of the bundles because, as you can see with the ad, we got a huge Tier 5 Cthulhu skin. Probably one of my favorite skins I've ever seen produced from this game. It's a very high-quality skin, a lot of fun to watch, and yeah, pick yourselves up some gems. There'll also be some other fun stuff going along with the weeks, along with Worshippers, XP boosts, all that kind of fun stuff. So you can also work on where you get maybe some diamond skins, some diamond gods up there. But Taco, game number 1, slow and methodical pace. I think we were sitting 20 plus, almost 25 minutes with about 5 kills on the board. And it was all in control of the Leviathans up until it really felt like one of those first pyromancers that the Kings kind of stole away. And then it was just so methodical by the end that they were able to push out to a win.
It's definitely been a reoccurring theme at the competitive level of play that there is going to be a lot of, I guess, delay in terms of the team fighting aspects, because when it comes to the team fight in general, especially when you get past that 20-minute mark, legit, one fight could very well spell the end of the game. So I think that these teams are just trying to play a little bit more methodically. You can't really, like, no pro is going to offer themselves up, so to say. So if, like, relics are on cooldown or ultimates aren't available, you're usually going to be pretty pressed to want to pull a Gold Fury or a Fire Giant or even the Pyromancer at times. And Leviathans, while I think that some of their single target focus from the compositions was working out initially, by the time it came to the team fighting stage, Camelot Kings were just all over them.
I mean, it took, what, 1 kill for them in the late stages to push down Tier 2, take a Phoenix, then work towards Fire Giant. I mean, this is the stage of the game that we got to for the Kings, and it's what they wanted the entire way through. Just get yourselves to the late game, then we've got, at least they feel like they may have the upper hand when it comes to the fights for it. They had Netroid, who is not only a tower shredder, but a god shredder as well, just with the nature of that Izanami and her build. Captain Twig getting a few big picks for himself, also stealing an objective with a single tick of Winds of Shamash. Not even the final burst damage tick of it, just one of the early ticks from it.
Yeah, Netroid just going with the old faithful there. But the Tainted Steel is definitely a fun little mix and match there.
Where did the Hunters just decide, hey, let's just start building Tainted Steel?
Well, I think that for Netroid's case, he kind of just recognized the fact that, hey, I might just be committed on by Yorkor, Panitam, Vrangyu, so he wanted to give himself some viable options for just that immediate shred capability. And, I mean, the player damage alone kind of speaks for itself. I think Zap has been a pretty big proponent on these crit-based builds. I understand it, because when it comes to hitting the objectives, you're doing massive damage, but if you're pen plus crit kind of counteracting each other in terms of the team fights, and I think more established teams that are playing much like heavier through their front lines, like the Camelot Kings, I guess it's more so at the top end, you're going to notice the difference in, hey, I have Chin Size plus Wind Demon and Rage, and I'm doing next to nothing in damage.
Unfortunately for the Atlantis Leviathans, they do fall down game number 1, but it's time for a mental reset for these guys. It's not unheard of for them to be in this position where they're down game 1 and they can make a swing back for games 2 and potentially game 3 afterwards, but it's going to take a little bit more of a dial back and a little more focus for them and really start working towards that later game. What kind of adjustments as far as picks go maybe do they need to kind of swap around to help them get to that point?
I don't know if it was necessarily the picks, because I actually think that both sides had relatively solid compositions. I think the only thing that really kind of put a halt there to the Leviathans is they just weren't able to continue spamming that aggression into the mid lane. Kings kind of just took note of all of that early focus that was being sent into Big Man Tings's direction, and so they just started playing a lot more peel-oriented for him. I also think that Twig really stepped it up with this Gilgamesh as well, because he was just forcing a separation to take place. He was forcing multiple fights to kind of break out in the backline there for the Leviathans, and they just ended up having to scatter a bit. I mean, we saw multiple instances, especially around that Fire Giant pit, where Panitam would look for the all-in commit with that Osiris, but nobody was close to try and back him up with it.
Yeah, just a ton of chaos provided by not just the god of itself with those Winds of Shamash from the Gilgamesh, but Captain Twig himself putting him in those strange positions, diving into the midst of everybody. But
I didn't even think this was a player cam, by the way.
Are we in the
so
void? Is he in the void? Is he okay? Do we need a light? What time of day is it here?
Mid-laning from the Abyss here, but hey, That's just the gamer layer, I think.
Yeah, just a reflection from the screen is all that you need when it comes down to it. See if they can get dialed up and focused for game number 2. Picks and bans underway. Last time around, the Kings ended up taking 2 big bans against Shinto specifically. We saw the Tiamat and we saw the Raijin as well. Maybe we see a little bit of that similarity here in game 2 as Leviathans stay true to their first ban by taking Hell off the table.
And again, I really don't think that the initial bans that the Leviathans went for were anything that they should really be looking too heavily to adjust. Maybe the trade out might become, instead of prioritizing that Osiris, I think they only go for the Osiris because they didn't want Captain Twig to have it, but they might have been better suited just opting for that Gilgamesh instead for Panitham, because it's not like we've seen a whole heck of a lot of Panitham on the Osiris, and believe it or not, while he's a warrior just kind of like the Gilgamesh, it's a very different style of play, and I just think that Gilgamesh has such a strong team fighting element behind him as well. It would have certainly alleviated some of that pressure from Yorkora and Vrangyu for not having to be the ones constantly looking to just like throw themselves out there to the Kings to force a little bit of a distraction factor.
Yeah, outside of a blink, your initiation from the Gilgamesh is from your leap, one of your 3 lower timer cooldowns, whereas with the Osiris you have to use the ultimate in order to jump into the midst of the fray. Your CC from the Gilgamesh comes from a quick and steady drop kick as opposed to a couple of slows and hoping they stay within range for the tether, so maybe a little bit of switch up for the diversity. The Leviathans, however, they felt one of the big problems was this Khepri that Genetics played last game, so they'll ban it away, but again, going for this first pick Osiris.
Hey, and it's all fair because, again, I actually think that if the Kings didn't have that Khepri as one of their final pieces in that first draft, they would have certainly had a much more difficult time in game number 1 because it was really just the single target focus that was taken away there. But Kings, they're going to run it right back with the Izanami, no questions asked. Curious, though, to see whether or not they look to prioritize the Gilgamesh or the Terra here, though, because Leviathans definitely took some heavy hits towards Genetics in that secondary banning phase. So Kings, if they don't want to be too stressed or having their support be too, stretched thin, then I think it might be worth considering taking an earlier pick option here.
I think it was an interview with Variety that I had, and I asked him, I said, man, how does Genetics feel when you go into a game and there's like 6 target bans that he just gets tilted? Like, we're already playing on ping, and now I'm tilted because I'm having to dig 6-7 gods into my god pool. So maybe we will see the Kings try and prioritize something for Genetics. That way he doesn't have to dig so far back into the pool. But at this point, he's so used to it. He's so in the mentality of, I'm probably not getting anything that I actually want, so might as well just go ahead and let them take away what they don't want to, and then just carry my way through the later stages of the game on whatever pick I feel like beyond there.
Well, speaking of pick preferences, I mean, we see the Leviathans toying around with the idea of maybe locking in this Kokolin. Have to remember that was banned away, I believe, by the Kings in their later banning phase. So Leviathans kind of trying to do their solo laner some justice here by just giving him a strong pressure pick. We saw Variety on the Hercules in game 1, and I mean, the solo lane was relatively quiet, but so was just about every lane that game aside from mid, and even then, it's not like there was crazy action taking place there all the time. It was just, oh, well, Zap's gonna rotate, okay, that's cool and all, but I think that Leviathans, with this Kokolin pick now locked in, and the Fafnir, they have a very strong, I think, front line in terms of just being able to establish early to mid-game pressure. Would like to see them look to maybe play around the buff invades a little bit more.
A really hefty front line between the double warrior with that Kokolin and now the Fafnir for their Guardian to lock in, allowing their carries to have the counter picks afterwards, so they'll have 4th and 5th pick amongst their team. Meanwhile, the Kings still trying to figure out what they want to go here. They could grab their mid laner and then start banning some things away from Shinto if that's a target that they may want to aggress towards, or they can just grab anything else here, maybe start taking some shots at Zapman. We'll see what the Kings elect to do, but I don't know. I think the further you can put Shinto in the god pool, the better it may be. Zap's already proven he can go 7 gods deep in a pool and still be just fine.
I don't think you can ban out Zapman personally.
No.
I think that Steve's been around long enough, J-Mac. I don't think there's a single hunter that he couldn't play and execute extremely well. I think it's really just how well the Leviathans are able to transition some of their laning phase pressure into those team fights, because again, I think that the mentality was definitely a strong one for Zatman because, especially at a competitive level play, we see these 20, 30-minute games with like 5, 6 kills, you know, so teams aren't really looking to brawl it out, and a lot of times it just boils down to the objective play. I mean, Scarabs quite literally won a set just outright taking the EFG because their Hunter was doing 90 damage to the tanks, but he did 806 plus to the objective. So I think that's more so what Zatman's trying to prioritize here. But on that same note, I think the Leviathans might feel it worthwhile to have some better elements, I think, just to really channel in on that team fighting potential, because the Kings, that's the primary thing that they're looking for in the mid to late game. That's why they like farming it out, just kind of playing it quietly, because a lot of their sets, J-Mag, I think, are just determined by 1 or 2 team fights in the mid to late.
Going to be a couple of split decisions as far as where the bans go. Heimdall and Baba Yaga banned away by the Kings, and they'll have option for their first pick immediately after the phase. Where flip side for Leviathans, we do see the Hercules, we see the Giannis banned away. So taking a shot at variety after the performance that he had on the Hercules the set before, I'm not surprised that this is a ban coming through. And it's one of those things that you talk about, you can't ban away Zatman. Teams just keep forgetting that Hera's a thing, and Big Man Tings is more than happy just picking up this mid laner every single time it's left available. Oh no, you banned away Raijin. Oh no, you banned away Tiamat. Whatever will I do? Hera, why not? Just slap it in there.
Well, I think this says a lot more about the Leviathans than anything else, because they had the opportunity to ban the Hera if they felt like it was a problem. So I think that the Leviathans now believing that since we took away the Khepri, that is Big Man Tings' safety net. Without that Scarab's blessing, this Hera that we were running at with Panitham, with Drangyu, with Hardcore, it's now not going to be an option, because if they get him low, if he doesn't have that Divine Shroud available or somebody to peel for him, he just dies.
Adaptation for the Leviathans, they lock Merlin and Chernobog, so again, you can't ban Zatman away. Chernobog, I wouldn't necessarily call the top of the charts for it, but he has had a lot of success as of recent. This Chernobog can put in some big damage. That stem gives him a ton of attack speed, so he can synergize with that bow build. Just has a decent laning phase, the dash in the wall, plus the Living Nightmare ultimate, global in the sense of if you actually do want to dive into the enemy backline using that ult, or maybe you can just drop it right back down for a nice cooldown reset for it. Meanwhile, the final lock-in for the Kings is going to be Xing Chen to give them a little bit of extra frontline beefiness.
Yeah, I have to assume that Xing Chen is intended for variety here, and Terra likely to be for genetics, but no guarantees. I think fairly interchangeable either way for the Camelot Kings here. But talking a little bit more on that Chernobog, I actually think that this is an incredibly strong matchup right now for the Izanami, because not only does Living Nightmare introduce that global, but there's also the refreshing of your cooldowns in general. So you throw out your Crystallized Curses, you throw out the Vicious Barrage, you catch the Izanami, you force her escape, and then all of a sudden you're doing it all over again. Really frequent beads burner, I think, option here now that Zatman's going to be on the Chernobog, but also he paid a visit to Big Man Tings in game number 1 when he was with Heim. And so I can only imagine that he might be looking to replicate that with a god that I think is even better at rotating.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, like we said, it is a global presence with it. You can go to anyone that you want, but that's the caveat, is you go to the enemy team, not one of your own, like an Athena ultimate. So there is that little hindrance with it, but Zatman, no stranger to diving into the midst of enemy backlines if necessary. If that's what the team says, hey, go, 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 we'll go ahead and jump through. But meanwhile, the Kings have picked a ton of frontline presence, but also a decent amount of peel, with the Terra has 2 big forms of CC, that Earth and Fury, so massive for them, and Xing Chen, great at locking people down with the hook slam, but most importantly, that ultimate for them as well. The Kings looking to close out this set with a 2-0, but will the Leviathans be able to shut them down? We'll find out in this game.
The Camelot Kings continue their 2-0 run over the top teams here in the SPL. This is a great opportunity to do so, and this feels like, Gore, anytime you're playing against the Kings, and it's indicated by game 1, it's indicated by the last games where we watched the Kings, you got to be like way in the lead going into the 20-25 minute mark against the Kings to give us any sort of confidence, because the Kings just have this knack for completely turning these games around, or starting them up even, maybe. You know, we were even last game. We were quiet. They had 2 kills 25 minutes in, and then they win a few minutes later.
I mean, they were down 4-1 in terms of kills, but they kept the gold lead right there. I mean, a couple of stolen objectives as well. One, I want to say gifted to them by the Leviathans. They had burned it down relatively fine, but then Wrong Yu killed off while rooted next to the Gold Fury, and then of course one where Twig just happened to walk in, throw the ult down. That was a little bit later, and so it helped keep them even further in the lead at the second one. But ultimately, they just played the map. They didn't necessarily play versus the Leviathans. They just played Smite, and the Leviathans were in the game with them. They didn't care who was on the other side. And unfortunately for the Leviathans, I think the biggest moment where maybe it really kind of broke their back wasn't this, big crippling team fight. I mean, at the very end, that definitely is what ended it. But it was the Fire Giant that they just weren't present for.
That's right. It's easy to forget that because there was
no fight.
There was nothing around it. It was just taken down by the Camelot Kings. And so those are things that the Leviathans will look to learn from and build on here going into game number 2. A chance for Twig to get aggressive. Polymorph, yes please. Captain Twig not able to follow up, but Genetics is here. Is Panatom going to have the disengage in time? Well, the disengage comes in the form of Blink plus Wrong Yu.
That is a good peel, and they're still chasing a little bit. That's Genetics that is following through.
Wasting time.
Also just returning back to lane, right? It's one of each. You kind of get to
I gotta
pursue
go this
the
way
kill,
anyway, man.
But also, you might be able to find something like that. A nice little knock around onto Zapman just to showcase what this Terra can provide and what Genetics is capable of. But that's good presence from the Kings to knock Panatom around, and to burn the Blink this early on takes away some of his engage. Granted, Genetics Twig also used theirs. It also showcases more of the damage that I think Tings is going to be able to provide. He didn't hit his main source of damage that time around, so there's no first blood, but I am pretty worried about the Kings in this first few minutes and what they can provide.
Yeah, if nothing else, Panatom slowed down a little bit. One level behind Captain Twig here. Worth mentioning the nice little stun dodge that Zapman had into the Terra wall and out right as Genetics triggered the stun there, and Zapman able to avoid it. And then the second time Zapman didn't have it. There you go, another example of it. So Zapman, maybe some counterplay here go against the Genetics Terra that I was surprised Genetics got, because we've talked about the support meta specifically around the supports on the top 4 teams in the league, and Genetics is in that conversation, of course, and it's been a lot of Ymir and Terra with him specifically. You always, look, you got to have a game plan against any team, but Genetics on Terra specifically, I think, carries some extra weight.
I think it's one of those things. The Ymir was, I think, 7-1, something like that. He had played at 8 games and had won quite a few times. This Terra has a higher win percent through slightly less games played, but ultimately they're the two that you see banned most against the Kings, and it's for the reason that they are the most prominent for Genetics. Despite the fact that he has crazy win rates, I think still 100% there on the Khepri, things like that, and that's now across like 6 or 7 games on Khepri, so it's getting even more impressive. If it's just 3, oh, that's maybe 3 lucky quote-unquote games that you get, but this has been ongoing. And the Genetics as well, it brings back that conversation of who do you have to ban when you play against the Kings. Do you spin to ban on your Ymir? Do you spin to ban on the Terra every single time, letting through things like this Gilgamesh, letting through the Hera, having to deal with, your Tiamat still, your Morgan the Phase potentially? Like, there's just so much that feels good in the hands of the Kings, and this is true for a lot of teams. But, you're arguing like 2 to 3 picks being banned specifically for one player. I think Genetics is more than fine if you're only forced to ban as Ymir, and he has to play something like the Terra or the Khepri or the insert next god here.
I remember I asked Genetics about it in a pregame interview, and I was like, look, man, you're getting a lot of bans thrown your way. It's kind of annoying. He said, got to get used to it. It happens. And that was where the top 4 support kind of conversation kicked off.
Yeah.
And even trickles down further than that. You look at Neil and Aurora and the bans that they take. It's like, it does get annoying by the time we're on our 5th or 6th god pick in support, but it is what it is, and Genetics is able to remain flexible there in that role. And I think, we're talking a lot about Genetics. Wrong Yu, of course, deserves a very similar amount of credit for the way that he's played so far this year, and the Fafnir has looked good but different. When you think of Wrong Yu, you think of kind of similar picks to Genetics. The lockdown, the setup. And there is some of that, of course, with this Fafnir. More team support in a traditional, maybe a utility sense here on this Fafnir. But if anyone's going to maximize that potential, it's Wrong Yu.
All these support bans, and still nobody's playing Kumba. All right, that's all I got to say.
I saw a Kumba band in the SEC today.
Oh.
It was a blur.
Was it against? No, Mogau's in. Yeah, wait, was it against Mogao?
Oh, so it was a solo lane ban.
Okay, yeah.
Never mind then. There was a Kumba ban. I stand by it. But it was not a.
It was a Mogao ban, not a support ban. That's the thing. I think it's interesting to see. We've already had a wider variety. That's my favorite thing when you do have one role that seems to be so strong, which right now it has been support and maybe could continue to be support. Both of these teams are just on the
jungle,
edge of jumping in. Yeah, pretty much anything but the junglers. Sometimes some of those assassins do peek their way into it. Sam's Thanatos comes to my mind. Maybe we'll get to the area where Kumba's gonna have to get played.
Jungle fight happening right now. How apt that we talk about it. It's the solo kill plus a little bit of help there from the Argus, or plus a little attempted peel from the Argus. Panatom jumps in, Panatom gets the kill, and Captain Twig cannot fight. It's a completed stone cutting sword plus mannequins for Panatom. And just now a full completed item, the Crusher there for Captain Twig. Maybe no surprise that that fight went that way.
I mean, it's early game, you're controlling things well, and Osiris is known to do a lot of damage. We saw what he was capable of doing against Big Man Tings' Hera at the beginning of last game. Took a little longer to get the first blood this time around, but you have to remember it was a lot of single pick oriented kills for the Leviathans in the first few minutes. And as much as first blood is nice, I actually think that's a great way to get Panatom back on track. He had fallen slightly behind earlier when he got bullied out of his own jungle, but now you get that first blood bounty. You're bordering about 1,000 gold, in fact surpassing 1,000 gold in the lead, and you hit level 7 before Twig, so you have about half a level experience, maybe entirely where a lot of that is, but you can see how back and forth this game is going just by the charts, and experience is maybe the most important as of right now. And so you really have to keep your mind on a swivel, because I don't know that the Leviathans can even take that first blood, even though it's a good win for them, and consider it something that they're really able to pull ahead with, because it's very similar to last game.
Right, and when the Kings are playing, you've got to push your early leads, and so we'll see if the Leviathans are able to do so. And that's a conversation we had last game where the Leviathans felt one note, not even in a bad way last year. This roster felt late game is where we win. This is a different roster this year. You know, of course, some changes around. I mean, Zapman, after all the roster swaps, is really the big difference, Zapman for Netrioid. Actually, fun little storyline there, Netrioid against his former team. Always fun to watch these guys play.
And Zapman, technically, trying to beat the guy that he replaced, ultimately.
Yeah, right. There's a bit of a web that gets us there.
Yeah, there's a love triangle somewhere in there.
But it is how it works out. But the Leviathans no longer one note, and they feel confident saying that about themselves as well. This is a team that can do things like this, find that advantage early and try to push things. Variety stunned down by Panatom, but he has not taken a whole lot of damage at all. Wrong U leaps forward. He's got Captain Twig. The transformation is there as well from the Fafnir. In comes Zapman thanks to his ultimate. Variety with the assistance of Argus sends the Whirlwind of Rage and Steel spinning around, but Zapman's avoided it. Genetics has been an afterthought here for the Leviathans, and Shinto is now on the board, and this Merlin starting to swing.
I missed where Genetics was, and it's just because he got lost so far back after the Pyromancer engage onto Variety.
There's more.
But now Twig, that last little bit of mana is not going to find anything.
Oh man, Big Man Tings gets the double polymorph, but that's not enough to save his own life. Captain Twig has no mana. And so maybe a little bit of time will give him enough mana to jump on out, but the root is there from Yarkor, and Nicole Cullen running wild. Captain Twig turns around, and Yarkor chases him to the grave. Down goes Twig, and it's a big swing here for the Leviathans, pushing that lead.
Game 1 was a bunch of single target picks. That was a good team fight from the Leviathans. Really good
going.
Engage. Genetics has died, respawned, come back into the fight. Variety, I believe, backed and healed and was able to come back and re-engage that, or he just passively healed up thanks to Genetics and the help of the team. That is such a clean engage, though, and I think the biggest difference maker is that leap. Panatom being able to get out just before Twig is able to pick up a kill and potentially stun him up against the wall. They do great at isolating Genetics at the very beginning of the fight, get rid of one big target player on their side, but also Variety was too low to be the front line for his team. All that was left was Twig. He takes a lot of damage. They can get back to Big Man Tings because the two front lines are displaced, and they just really do drive that nail forward. And you had highlighted it best, but Zapman, not just with good tech dashing into the wall to avoid Variety's ult, but with the ult coming over here, showcases how pivotal this pick is going to be in the tournament.
And that's something that Netroid just can't mirror. He's got to be there in the old-fashioned way with the rest of his team. Pyromancer started. As Wrongy spreads the course to his team here, and look at the engage from Yarkor. That one's clean and easy for the Leviathans. Variety now dies for the first time this game. Pyromancer's not been reset. Argus still rumbling around there. Can Genetics and Big Man Ting steal this one away? The answer is no. Instead, Yarkor might be the target here as Captain Twig leaps in.
Yarkor is really low, but so is Twig. Twig has barely any mana to work with. Yarkor, though, is going to get taken out.
Well, the Camelot Kings have returned some CC right back to the Leviathans, but it is not nearly enough. It's the Pyro. It's 2 kills. It's going to be a third on the Genetics when Zapman hits some autos, and the Leviathans come up big. If there were any concerns about this lead getting pushed, I think now doubly so, Gore. Those concerns are by the wayside.
Well, they've taken exactly what they needed, and they pushed it as far as they can. This is what I'm more interested in. What can Netroid do?
Good skip.
Just a really, really good question, because he needs this tower, and he needs some pressure on this side of the map to alleviate the fact that it's been a 5-on-4 on the right-hand side. Nobody has been able to do too much to balance this out. And yeah, that tower stays standing. In fact, now Panatom's chasing Netroid.
Panatom didn't get the axe trigger there with the old damage circle, and so Netroid can walk away here. Do want to give double highlights though to this skin. Pretty cool auto attacks if you ask me. And hey, there's a gem sale going on right now, so you can get in the game. I don't know at all if this skin is part of that sale, but you can buy gems and then buy that skin.
Yeah,
so
the skin is for sale no matter what. Maybe not on sale, but you can buy it.
Right. With discounted gems and Cthulhu.
That you get on
Time
sale.
as a construct, reality is meaningless. So
I really like that idea.
What?
First off, time is a construct. We made it up. Like,
yeah, that's a non-statement. That's
we do move forward.
We're
but
12
also,
minutes into this
like,
game because of
minutes,
what we built.
We just made minutes. Yeah, that's a human construction for us. Like, time, I guess, is not itself. This is getting very philosophical.
Yeah, right.
We're all gonna die, so you might as well be nice. That's what I was trying to get to.
That's a good thumbs up for me there. That's a Texas-sized 10-4 there, buddy. And the Leviathans in a very close matchup, Gore, as we reroute
Welcome
ourselves.
to the Smite Nihilist League.
As we reroute ourselves in reality. Because reality is meaningful, at least in the context of the Leviathans versus the Camelot Kings. The Kings, they've been in situations like this before, and it is much more dire than it was in Game 1. Especially for Big Man Tings, as the Leviathans have learned how to dive a Hera. And 0-3 now is Big Man Tings. And so we saw, remember, early pressure from the Leviathans on the mid lane in Game 1. We never really saw it doubled down on, outside of, maybe a return from Panatom, poke your head around here and there. This is a concerted effort to jump on Hera, punish Captain Twig, and now there's a 3-level differential, and it could get worse once this Gold Fury goes down. There's a 3-level differential, Gore, in the mid lane. And if that's not enough, there's a 3-kill and 2-assist differential in the mid lane. Shinto is on fire at the moment.
Yeah.
He has the ability to take these fights over in ways that Big Man Tings can't yet.
I mean, it's 9-1. They've got 5,000 gold here 13 minutes in. Look, if you are going to beat the Kings, you had highlighted earlier, you need to get into that late game stage with a very massive lead. This is how you do that. You build it up from the ground. And so far, they've been very successful in those regards. The Leviathans have been able to find a lot of the kills. They've been able to find a lot of these neutral objectives. But I'm still worried about the buckling down for the full team fight. But not as worried as I normally would be, because so far they've won a lot of these engagements where there have been at least 4 members of the Kings, but Netroid hasn't been there. The Kings have never been at truly full power. That's where things can really pivot, is when the Hunter gets involved.
This may be a chance for Netroid to get involved as well. Argus from Big Man Ting slows down the engagement. The Leviathan's actually happy to take that. They'll back away while Argus times out here. Panatom does use his ultimate as well, and that's been a big engage tool for this Leviathan's team. And so both teams spending a little bit on the skirmish there. But you're right, Gore. I mean, Netroid decently into his build here, about halfway, with the Icavale Oboe, and then what we assume is a Silver Branch third. Whereas Zapman still opting for something similar to what he built last game, Icavale Oboe, and then Rage this time. And so if the Camelot Kings itemize similarly to the last game, Variety, Twig, and Genetics all build Spectral, you saw how limited Zapman was in Game 1. Yeah. Maybe that's an avenue to limit Zapman's impact in Game 2.
Notably, he started doing much more damage. So he got the Rage, then Wind Demon, then the Titan's Bane. The Titan's Bane jumped up the damage output we saw, especially when in conjunction with Shinto and what he was able to accomplish. But it was still much less than what you would have expected And so it might be an easy pickup. Genetics would probably have to go into that item now to be able to get it useful, and with the amount of gold that he's been getting, also 2 levels down, so he would really want to start scooping it up. Variety has a little more wiggle room, Twig as well, being able to get that as their 6th slot as they lock it in. And that is probably where they're going to need it, because Zap, again, notably large in a lot of those early fights with those huge ult rotations. Kind of quiet in the last couple of minutes, but so have the Leviathans. They've been getting aggressive, they've been zoning him out, and the Kings haven't been taking the bait.
Gore, do you think that the Leviathans are concerned about healing here in this game? I think a Pestilence, a Toxic Blade, a Divine Ruin, and a Curse Donk, upgraded Curse Donk, would probably say yes. So the Leviathans are limiting a route back into these team fights for the Camelot Kings, but this has been the route into the team fight for the Leviathans. Let's pour everything we've got into Big Man Tings. Let's take his Aegis away while we do it. And a killing spree for Panatom. In the meantime, maximizing the moments where they're behind are the Camelot Kings, and they'll finally knock down the Tier 1 tower and left.
Variety is now the one in trouble. This Hera has had nothing of the sort of peel that they had in game number 1, and I think
Variety.
the same thing can be said for the Xingqian here.
Ooh, he's luckily able to get out of range of the stun. Has to use his ultimate just to confirm his escape, but then it's going to be a Tier 2 tower. I don't know about taking down. Okay, yes. The Leviathans choose to stick around, deal the last bit of damage here, and take that one away. So Big Man Tings at 0-4. He's been the target in the eyes of the Leviathans, and it has absolutely paid off. And this time, Gore, it pays off to the tune of an exposed Phoenix on the right side of the map.
Yeah, last time, so 4-1, especially I think still around this minute mark, and the map state was favoring the Kings, and they were able to start getting some interesting zones, and we're really bouncing back and forth.
We're a far cry from that.
Yeah, this time around, what is that? 6,000 gold, 9 kills separating them, and the map state is outrageously in favor of the Leviathans. Only 3 towers left standing for the Kings, and as you had just mentioned, there is a Phoenix exposed, so if you theoretically win one good, clean fight around the Fire Giant, you can just barrel down to get to the Titan and not have to worry about too much. 5 towers still standing for the Leviathans here. That's where things get a little more hectic. The Titan gets more health, but that's also a lot of the gold disparity between the Kings and the Leviathans. Maybe a chance for them to start making it up if they're able to win a Fire Giant fight and barrel down some of those objectives. But first they have to make a stand, and honestly, they just haven't had a good grouping from the Kings at all this game, really.
Right. And not that it matters, you know, if Netrioid or BMT's on the left side of the map, but it's BMT right now. And so if a Pyro had been started or an FG, there wouldn't have been an immediate reply by the Camelot Kings. Zapman's able to take down his purple buff. That might have been an opportunity for Captain Twig to get aggressive, but I'm not sure. I'm trying to fight Zapman right now if I'm Captain Twig. Twig's 0-3. Netrioid is 3 levels behind. And Zapman has added a full Wind Demon since his last back. I'm not sure that's a fight that Twig or Netrioid want to take anyway.
No, it's definitely not a place that I want to find myself in. I'm actually more worried now about Zap's rotations. You had highlighted at 2 levels. Let's call it 2.5, because Zap should hit 20 before Netrioid hits 18, I believe. But that's really where the problem is that Zap's going to join these fights, and as much as I think Netroid's going to be a power-up for the Kings because they fought everything up to this point 4v5, it's not going to be near as big a power-up as just Zap existing there, and you can see the amount of damage he's able to do to these neutral objectives. Last time around, by the time Zap finished his rage and was looking to get that Wind Demon, they had the gold to pick up the Spectral Armors on the other side. They already had them about halfway built once the rage was done, and then finished it before the Wind Demon was done. They don't have that anymore, so the Kings are trailing behind, and that's giving a lot more presence to the damage that Zap's going to be capable of towards the tail end of this game.
And you know, it's a bit of a non-statement, but looking at the player damage charts, 1.2k for Netrioid. Zapman has a kill and 3 assists, and is only at 2.6k, so neither Hunter really...
So what you're saying is Zap hasn't been working for his kills.
Of course, he's just, well, his
typical
kill,
Hunter. He's just
no
coming
S
in
on that one. He's only got 1 kill. No, I'd argue 2.6k of his kills or 2.6k of his damage probably went into one of those kills. There's that one rotation into the big fight for the Leviathans where Zapman made his money that Netrioid wasn't able to mirror, and that's really it that we've seen from Zapman up to this game, and that's certainly not a knock on Zapman. That's more of me saying the Hunters outside of that one moment haven't been a massive factor here just yet, but Netrioid's still plugging away. Still feels like a time bomb that the Leviathans have to worry about. This Izanami late game with this style of build, so difficult to fight against if given that opportunity, and that's a big if. And the Leviathans don't want to give the Kings that opportunity as Fire Giant's been started up. Wrong transforms, sends the Coerce down Zapman's way, but Genetics is going to get chased down on one side. Variety left on the other. Yarkor won't use his ultimate just yet. Fire Giant has been reset, but doesn't regain all of its HP, so a little less for the Leviathans to work.
And this is the difference in those fights. We're now 20 minutes in, and it's Variety's health bar. Before, he was virtually melted, similar to what just happened to Genetics.
Twig drops Winds of Shamash and does not drop the FG. Into the dirt he goes, and it's Rongyu who sends him there. Variety blinks on away. Zapman makes his way back to his own base. He's got to dash away his Argus from Big Man Tings. Sends this Chernobog in the opposite direction. Panatom is back as well. Shinto gets a kill on the right side of the fight. Panatom running down the back line. Big Man Tings trying to get on the board, but the only thing that's added is a 5 in the death column. Right side Phoenix being siege.
I mean, a back and forth game number 1 to just Leviathans in game 2. Kukulkan Yarkor is the only one who has died to this point, and they defend that Phoenix. Granted, it is incredibly low, and one more push could probably knock it down. The Kings are just wildly out of control this game, and the Leviathans are running away with what they wanted. Zap with a brilliant attack.
Can they end is the question. Twig is up
they've
in
got
3
plenty of
seconds.
time.
Genetics has delayed the wave just a little bit. He's going to die here, I think. No, he's not. That's my fault. And Genetics will get back to the fountain. Captain Twig is respawned, so Genetics buys enough time for his jungler to get back into the game, but there's still a mid lane Phoenix and 5 FG buffs that the Leviathans have their eyes on.
Yeah, so to answer the question, right there, they're not going to end the game. At this pace, they're going to end the game sometime soon, especially after they get this Phoenix.
Netrioid is back in respawn as well. It's a full 5-member defense now from the Camelot Kings, if there is one to be had, and there is not, as the Phoenix falls in the mid lane. There's still 2 minutes and a half on this FG buff for the Leviathans, and they get a lot with the first chunk of time on that. Right and mid Phoenixes both gone. And Gore, the Leviathans don't show much of a sign of slowing down here. As if gold was a concern at this point. There's still a couple pockets left in the left side for Tier 1 and Tier 2 tower. But why not play clinical here, right? Why roll the dice if you're the Leviathans? We have a lot of time on this Fire Giant buff. We can go back, spend up some of that gold, and then turn our eyes towards the left.
I think this is a difficult spot to be in. Maybe a good spot still, though, for the Kings. It's 14-1. Here's what I'm going to say. Well, hold on.
No way this is a good spot for the Kings.
No, listen. It's a bad spot to be in. But if the 2 Phoenixes that you are going to have down are going to be your mid and right Phoenix, that's the best case scenario for you. So there's some good in it.
You're right.
Technically.
It is not as bad as it could be.
It is not an abysmal disastrous dream where you just want to get out. It is something that you can still fight back from.
I might want to get
They
out
could
of this.
win. They could still
They
win. We've
absolutely
seen
could.
teams win with
You're
less.
You're right. I'm not being fair. Yeah, but this is going to make it more difficult if Panatom's able to get this kill. He's not, but look at the confidence from this Osiris. He's blinking into 3, and that's because Zapman's here on the assist. Naturally alone on the right here as Yarkor chases down the other side. Genetics just worked away at by Panatom and Zapman. We're going Titan diving, and Genetics is able to survive with the assistance of his mid laner. Panatom running back beneath the left Phoenix, and space has been bought, Gore. We've got a Titan siege on the horizon.
Yeah, definitely not a good position now. They are locked in their base, and Panatom does not care about the Titan. That is not the kind of fight you need. But Netroid's here. This feels like the first time I've got to see the Kings at full power in a fight. You can see with the fire minions, the Leviathans are going to take that as their way to go in.
They're down a couple ultimates, though. I'm not sure about full power as far as where the Kings want to be. Yarkor looks for the engagement. Netrioid dashes on away. There is a push back here from the Camelot Kings, but is it enough? The Titan not looked at just yet by the Leviathans. Instead, it's the good old team fight into the fountain. Go the Camelot Kings, and the initial push has been repelled.
Well, they're going to back off, but look, Dave, you're barely deflecting this, and there's still one big ultimate on the side. That's wrong, that transformation that he's going to be able to pick up.
That's a big polymorph from Big Man Tings. Heads up for some damage. This is not as straightforward as the Leviathans thought it might be. 3 Phoenixes down, fire minions pouring into the base of the Kings, but the FG buff falls off, and the Titan's still alive.
Hey, the Kings are in it, technically. This is where things... You remember how before I was talking about how at least you only had 2 Phoenixes down and that you could theoretically fight around a Fire Giant?
Yeah, and that's a good spot for the Kings.
Well, like a quote-unquote, like better than like this kind of spot for the Kings.
Yep.
All right, so it's 14-1. Almost 20,000 gold. 3 Phoenixes down and barely repelled that last fight. I think they could have won it had Variety been able to connect. And that's, again, the big difference maker for me. Seeing this team grouped up when they get all of their ults, if Variety and Genetics are able to get the setup that they want, I think it is a really, really good fight for the Kings. The problem is the Leviathans, every step of the way, have just said no to that exact scenario. They've got 2 Sunders that are coming up. They also have their Cursed Ankh to make sure that any healing Genetics is going to be able to provide in the middle of a fight from his ult just is negligible, is null, is nothing. And so it is very difficult to jump in here and be as successful, especially because Panatom's just running you down like it's nothing.
Is he going to get this kill on the big man Tinks? Thank God he's not, for the sake of the Camelot Kings. But now there's a re-engage. Oh, Yarkor grabs the kill nonetheless. And now Variety's on the menu, and Yarkor's hungry to eat. Rongyou trying to close that gap. Will leap on forward. Captain Twig makes it back to the fountain, but Variety's got to take the long way around.
And he's just, look, getting chased down. This is going to be a kill.
They let him
eventually.
in. Let him in.
Oh, what a good stun. That's the kind of kill you need.
It's a bait. Now Yarkor going low. He transformed here, and maybe it's Twig who gets baited in by his solo laner instead. And the Camelot Kings, by the skin of their teeth, will survive.
But they lose the mid-Phoenix in the
Mid-Phoenix
process.
will not.
That's what's about to happen to Right. There's a fire minion wave walking into it. Variety, he has some damage, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. He's going to need some help to try and stop and make sure. It is enough to make sure that right-hand Phoenix can stay alive.
Alrighty.
Luckily, the Titan didn't sustain any damage. You have to remember, if it had, it doesn't heal back up until these Phoenixes are back. There's just no good position for the Kings outside of trying to steal this.
My goodness, we are only 26 minutes in. It feels like this game has been going on a lot longer than that. I thought for sure this would be an enhanced FG, but it is not. Ping's ring on the left side of the map. For good reason. Fire minions are making their way in. A little bit of time for the Kings here. Just a little bit of time, because there's a wave crashing out from the Camelot Kings to delay that fire wave. Ting started trending towards that FG. Instead, he's going to go back, clear up some of these waves. The Camelot Kings likely communicating that they're fine and comfortable just backing off for a second. They can delay things and give Ting some time. 0-6 now is this Hera. To say this game has not been easy for big man Tings is somehow an understatement, but we did see a big chunk of damage from him in that Phoenix defense, in the base defense from the Camelot Kings. They're going to have to do it, though, up against another FG for the Leviathans.
You know what I saw?
What'd you see?
The 420 crit from Zapman onto the FG, keeping things...
That is calculated.
Yeah, just calculated for him. Look, I mean, the Kings are in a position where if you had been able to get into that FG pit, which already is a difficult task, you're getting burned down. Shinto has insane amounts of damage. I mean, the top 4 of the damage charts are Leviathans, and even the bottom of those is 4,000 damage above the top of the Kings. I think it's going to need a huge turnaround and a huge repel right here for the Kings to stay in it.
Variety gets stunned, and look at the follow-up damage that's there. Rongyu's transforming. The Camelot Kings have to know that the push is coming shortly. Coerce finds its way into 3 members of the Leviathans, and in they go. On to Genetics. It's a double knockup from Yarkor, and the setup is gorgeous. And the Leviathans are there on the follow-up, rampaging at Shinto, who's got himself a double kill on the Titan Siege. Goodbye, Twig. Goodbye, Game 2. The Leviathans send us on to Game number 3.
What a wild difference between Game 1 and Game 2. It feels like two completely different teams that show up there. I mean, you get this back and forth nature of game number 1. Everything's equal. A couple of objectives stolen away by the Kings keep them in it and keep this thing bouncing back and forth. You get to game number 2, the Leviathans didn't let them step forward once. The only time that they get a kill, it goes on to Genetics, like maybe the worst person to try and scoop that up. I mean, that is just a wild amount of control from the Leviathans from what felt like, 5 minutes in? I mean, they didn't let the Kings breathe.
Even in losses, I couldn't tell you the last time the Kings got routed like that. That has been a minute. The Kings have won like 6 or 7 or 8 straight games, not sets, but games.
Yeah.
I have not seen them beaten that badly in a while. But this is what we knew the Leviathans were capable of. And as we all deserve, we got a Game 3 between the Leviathans and the Kings. You don't want to miss it. Game 3 up next.
Hey there, Smite fans, Aggro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce that the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
That's a lot of cores. Plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true.
I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
And what's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240 Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the Smite Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible Smite experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's @Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
And you're telling me an alien wore this?
Welcome back to the desk, getting ready to get set for game number 3, but we can't get set up and ready to go without thanking our title sponsor for the SPL. It is, of course, Alienware, providing you guys so much insane product. I mean, think about it, the Aurora Ryzen 10 Edition desktop, just to name one. The 25-inch gaming monitor, that's 240 hertz, by the way. That's also a really good one. You can get that as well with some nice discounts. If you go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW, you can get your hands on some of those sweet peripherals and level up your game just like our pros have. And speaking of leveling up, the Atlantis Leviathans in Game 2, they certainly leveled up, and it looked like a very one-sided affair in this match, Taco.
Yeah, today's content is looking pretty good so far, J-Mac, and I think the Atlantis Leviathans could not be more satisfied with that Kepri ban that they opted for at the start of that Picks and Bans drafting phase, and it seemed to make all the difference here for the Leviathans. I mean, we saw in Games 1 kind of those hints towards that early laning phase pressure that they were able to build up, but just couldn't quite close it out in the team fighting aspect. And that wasn't the case here in the slightest. Shinto as well with the Merlin, I think. That was a really refreshing switch up to see him kind of go back to. Been a bit, I think, since we've seen Shinto on the Merlin, so he was just tearing through this double Guardian frontline the Camelot Kings were trying to toss up, and it wasn't just Shinto. I think Zetman also putting in a lot of work on the Chernobog.
And Penatom as well from the jungle, putting in some good damage and some good work with this Osiris. I think getting hardcore on something very comfortable with that Cucullin provided them a lot of extra safety with that front line, a lot of extra initiation and damage, and the kills just kept racking up for the Leviathans. They finished out, and Camelot Kings just could not find that same level of success because, as you highlighted, the Kepri got taken away. A lot of big man Tinks' safety with that Hera was stripped away with just that singular ban.
And Hera is most certainly a feast or famine type of god. If you fall behind even the slightest bit with Hera, it just feels awful. You have very little opportunity, I think, to really try and just delay in general. This King's composition was very much dependent on making out of those laning phases, and Leviathans just took full advantage of that. I think that, again, I mean, the damage kind of speaks for itself here. Shinto beneath them, top of the charts. Obviously, Zatman able to be a strong representative there also, but I mean, he did more than enough in terms of just like deleting those objectives and definitely helping to close out wherever he needed on that global gameplay.
I'm looking not just at that top damage that came from Shinto, but even Wrong Yu picking up nearly 10,000 player damage with the Fafnir, almost the same level of damage that the entire rest of the Kings were able to do. I think the highest I saw there was 12,000 from a singular player there, so Wrong Yu even stepping up to bat with the Fafnir, a complete momentum shift for the Leviathans. They had a little bit of a struggle after losing Game 1, but you wouldn't be able to guess it in Game 2. It looked like an entirely different team out there.
Very curious to see how this drafting phase goes down for game number 3 here, J-Mac, because I have a hunch might not be the Leviathans in that first pick position. Camelot Kings, I'm not totally sold on whether or not they feel as though they need that Khepri in these compositions, but it definitely seems, at least based off what we saw in game number 2, they definitely did not have a response for what the Leviathans were opting for there.
Yeah, the Khepri played a huge part for them game number 1, game number 3 as we start pushing forward for it. Them going for it, it kind of opens up the question of, was that Khepri so central to their composition, so central for their team that it needs to be first pick, to where now you potentially risk giving away Osiris and maybe even Gilgamesh along with it? I think that's kind of the question that gets posed.
If Leviathans are in that second pick position, I don't think they let Osiris go through. I think that they would probably end up adjusting their bans so that Captain Twig still not eligible to take that Osiris for himself. That pick is just so controlling, I think, whenever the Camelot Kings are able to opt for it, largely just because of the fact that it's not even necessarily a guarantee that it'll be for Twig. I know that we've largely seen only him, if not exclusively him, with the Osiris on that team, but again, it does still have that interchangeable option if the Kings wanted to look for it.
Well, let's see what adjustments are made in the picks and bans for game number 3. We talked a lot about the Khepri, how it was so quintessential for them in game 1, stripped away game 2, and it just isn't the same Kings draft. Kings, however, are going for second pick yet again, so they're going to allow Leviathans to have that first pick option, which means they'll also have first bans on top of that. But it means that the Kings get 2 picks on the tail end of it. Both the previous games, it was Izanami and Gilgamesh. One thing that I don't think we highlighted all, but it was something that I just kind of noticed as I was sitting back and watching that last game. Did Artemis get picked or banned at all in those first 2?
Artemis is bait. I think that a lot of teams are starting to discover that while Artemis can be a very strong team fighting aspect, when you take into consideration some of the other hunters that are starting to rise in the popularity, it's the Rom, it's Izanami, and again, I really do think we're going to start seeing a lot more Turnabog soon enough here, because he's got some great matchups against Artemis specifically, if Artemis does, come back into the mix. But I don't anticipate the Kings or Leviathans to really look to prioritize Artemis anytime soon here. I think that Nethroid and Zatman would both rather take their chances elsewhere, and Rom certainly looking to be, or this Rom ban, I should say, is looking to be a little bit of Nethroid's kryptonite.
Well, unfortunately, I can't use the phrase second verse same as the first, because we're in game 3, and it's actually the third verse same as the second. It doesn't rhyme, so it's not as cool, unfortunately, but it's the same 3 bans from game number 2 for both of these teams. Hell, Rom, Khepri, making sure to keep genetics off the Khepri, and the Raijin, Tiamat, Yamoja with an Osiris first pick by Leviathans. But this is the first switch-up that we do see in these top 3. Giannis as a first lock-in for the Kings.
I mean, hard to hate on the Giannis pickup, and Gilgamesh, I think you can never go wrong with the Gilgamesh response whenever he's available. Granted, you also don't want to run the risk of just letting the Leviathans have that one for free, because Gilgamesh Osiris pressure is very difficult, I think, for any back and front line to try and deal with. So the Kings, whether they choose to run it back with Twig on the Gilgamesh, I think is kind of more up in the air. But the global asset, yet again, Giannis being brought in here for big man Tings, and if it's anything like the Giannis's we've seen, J-Mac, it's always that steady threat of you just need one good through space and time, and that could be the end of it.
I mean, we saw it with Hurrywin where his damage was pretty much non-existent for the entirety of a game, and then he hits 2 Giannis ultimates. It's the only 2 that he needed to hit, and he slams them, is able to lead the Dragons to victory. We'll see if the Kings can have that same luck for themselves. We even saw it in the last set with the Scarabs, where Giannis was such a top priority for them, was able to get them through the early stages. And in late game, you have that mobility, you have that utility from the god, but you also have a ton of damage that can pump out from it. We'll see where the Kings shift the remainder of their draft. They had the Giannis Gilgamesh, where flip side, they're picking up a Hunter very early on the draft comparatively to the last couple of matches for the Leviathans. Chernobog as a 3rd pick to couple along with the Fafnir.
It's just a response factor for the Giannis, because you see the Kings prioritizing that global. Leviathans don't want to run the risk of Zapman losing that Chernobog, especially with how strong it looked in game number 2 there. Have to remember as well, when he finishes off that Silver Branch, it plays very nicely into the Chernobog passive. You've got the 10% pen and all of that power to boot after the fact. It just works so well with the crit options that Zap has been very insistent on here. But Hercules going to be the takeaway here for the Kings, and I do like this adjustment. I think throwing variety onto a pressure pick option, especially knowing that the Leviathans chose to take the Chernobog over the Kakolin, so now Yarkor, he's going to have to resort to something else.
And look at the adjustments made along with it. Not just the Hercules picked up variety, which he performed on it very well in his previous set and in game number 1, but they're also taking away Hardcore's Kakolin. They're taking the Odin away, so making sure to get rid of some of that lockdown, some of that comfort for the solo laner and force Hardcore onto something a little bit different. However, the Leviathans, we do see some similar banning style. The Khepri was the first one taken away. Now in the second phase, we have Ymir, and I would not be surprised at all if we see the Terra, but instead, it will be the Ares banned away by the Leviathans, making sure to continue. I don't know. I would have imagined that the Terra would have been I'm kind of thrown for a loop here seeing the Ares.
I think that Leviathans are cool to let the Terra go through, because while Earthen Fury is incredibly strong, Leviathans just have so much for the laning phase pressure, and I think that if they can just look to replicate what they were doing in game number 2, Terra's not a Khepri. She doesn't have the Scare's Blessing again, and I also don't believe that a Terra would really complement this Giannis all that well in the mid lane either, and for the Camelot Kings, they might be better suited maybe trying to turn that attention elsewhere. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's likely that Terra is going to be their last pick option here, but I think Leviathans really, the main reason you see that Ares ban is because of what follows after the fact, this Merlin Erlong.
Yeah, and as much as I do respect the Ares ban for it, yes, you have the Erlong, you have the Merlin, neither of them CC immune with any portion of their kit, so they are forced into a purification beads. Very smart ban for those 2 picks going through. I'm kind of with you now on maybe not wanting to go for the Terra specifically because the Merlin was picked up. Probably the best applier of Divine Ruin of any of the gods in the Mage tree. Probably one of the best anti-heal appliers in the entire game with just how safe and how much range and area he controls with those abilities. But the Camelot Kings are hovering the Terra. They're looking at it. They're considering it. We'll see if they lock it in.
It's hard not to want to resort to the Terra here for Genetics, because it is a god that I think he does feel extremely comfortable with. But again, hard to have the same level of confidence with the god like Terra, knowing that you're kind of doing yourself a disjustice by trying to take it into the likes of a Merlin and the Erlong, because I think there is just so much lockdown potential, because what Terra is great for is avoiding the knockups, which I guess, yeah, Erlong has that, but the pin, that could be problematic.
Could be even more problematic for the Sylvanas that was locked in for the Kings. Still in the healer category as far as the supports go, but a little bit of a flip with the switch with how mobile this god is. Terra, very mobile, can have 2 dashes if she uses one of them to break the monolith or break a wall. Sylvanas, no dashes, but does have a way to bring people back to him with the pull, has the long-range root, the giant AoE knockup. Heal, maybe not as prominent for it, but it's so easy to apply nowadays. They've made the cast speed for it so much quicker to where as soon as you get that off in the fight, your teammates are going to get that benefit. Really good for the Lotus Crown as well. How do you like the Sylvanas with this draft?
I think with this draft, I'm not really too keen on him. But again, I really am not certain that there's any supports that would have felt all that awesome here. Maybe the Cerberus could have been a consideration, but I think that for the Kings here, their primary concern was just finding something with consistent clear, consistent aggression, and I think they're also favoring that AoE knockup because Gilgamesh, Hercules, they're cool and all, but they don't really have a whole ton in terms of re-applicable crowd control, and I think that Sylvanas might be a little bit more consistent in that aspect, but again, I also think that the Leviathans have some excellent tools at their disposal to kind of counteract all of that.
Yeah, this is a really good comp for the Leviathans to destroy a Sylvanas. Long-range pin set up from an Erlang Shen, slows or temporary pulls in with the Merlin via his arcane stance, and even with the ice stance for some of the slows. Fafnir, the long-range hammer. It's going to be a difficult road. I think a lot of it's going to hinder on the fact of this Sylvanas. How is Genetics going to perform with the Sylvanas? We saw what Inbound could do with it with the Scarabs. Can Genetics pull the same level of play with it? We'll have to find out. Jumping into Game 3, Dulcin and Gormizer standing by to bring the action.
Oh, wow. We've had a lot of conversations around Genetics and his God Pool, and how sometimes he has to dig into that God Pool and find something interesting to play when a lot of what he wants to play is banned out against him. Terra was an option here. And instead, it's the Sylvanas that gets played. Still Dulcin, Gormizer, and Doug for the third and final game of the day and of the set between the Leviathans and the Camelot Kings. And then remember, Phase 2 playoff standings, or seeding is the word I'm looking for, implications in every single matchup moving forward. No team far enough ahead to be exempt from potential shifts as far as seeding goes. So these very important. But Gore, let's pick up with this Sylvanas here. It's played one time.
Yes.
It's been inbound, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes.
It's going to be Genetics this time.
And it was a win. I don't know what that was. I'm sorry, man. But yeah, he got the 100% win rate on it as well. And I will admit, there were a lot of great plays in that game from the Scarabs, and some of them were not Genetics. There was a steal, or not Genetics, not Inbound.
I bet none of them were Genetics.
Yeah, in fact, none of them. You would be right. 0% of those plays in the Scarabs Bolts game was made by Genetics. But he did make some really crucial plays around a Fire Giant, some really good plucks onto front lines that made the big difference. And that's what you're looking at. Sylvanas, he has a good heal. He's got a good root. He's got an interesting ult. As JMac had illustrated, he's a tree, so he doesn't necessarily run very fast. He's very immobile, but he does have fantastic pull potential, and that setup can really change the pace of a fight. So if Genetics can land a few of those onto some very high-priority targets, could just spell the end of the Leviathans.
To be clear, wait, is Sylvanas the tree or the dude riding the tree?
Okay, yeah, Sylvanas is the dude riding the tree.
I know.
Grover.
I'm nitpicking.
Grover's the tree.
Grover's
Dave,
the tree.
which you know.
That's right, I know. We did Paladins. I should know these things.
And he throws an axe. He uses the weapon used against his people to find vengeance.
There's an upgrade for Sylvanas. Is a stance switcher where you can either be Grover and have Grover's like kit from Paladins, or you just play as Sylvanas, little dude on top.
I like that because you wouldn't even have to change the 3. The 3 as Sylvanas would pull people to you.
Yep,
the
that's
3 as Grover would do exactly what it does, like you said, in Paladins, pull you to like walls or other players.
Yeah, you and I are on something serious right now, and or on a thought train that's super serious and super locked in. And I think that that definitely holds some weight here. Both solo laners were low. Both solo laners were low just a second ago. Yeah, we had some coffee between games 2 and 3, so...
I'm always weird.
I had some coffee between games 2 and 3, so everyone better buckle up right now, because this one is going to get wild. Just like Captain Twig received some damage from Panatom here. It's a blue buff invade early on for the Leviathans, but it's a good old 1v1 that Variety loses handily. So now this blue buff up for grabs now. Yarkor blinks forward, forces Captain Twig to jump away. Blue buff has been dropped. Yarkor will pick it up. So early pressure goes to the Leviathans.
And Yarkor has just been controlling Variety so far this lane, although now it's the dual lane that might be in trouble.
Wrong. You dashes in onto Genetics, sends out both Sunders one way or the other. And the Leviathans are able to secure their purple buff, so Zatman's going to go back and pick that one up. It's not often, Gore, you see a Hercules getting out-bullied. But maybe if anyone's going to do it, it's an Osiris.
Yeah, it's definitely Osiris as of right now. I still think the kill potential is there for Variety. You have to be very close where Yarkor's playing up next to the tower line, because that is where you lose against a Hercules. You can be winning any other part of the lane, but do not get that close to the tower range. And that's really, I think, where the conversation for Variety comes through, and for both of these players. Let's go back to game number 1. Variety, Hercules. Makes sense. Yarkor was playing Cerberus. It's a Guardian versus a Warrior. Game number 2, you get the Cucullin versus a Xing Chen. It's a Guardian versus a Warrior, and so far, both times, the Guardian has been the one that lost because of the impact, in my eyes, from the Warrior. Variety, when he joins the fight later on in game number 1, really was driving things forward. Variety in game number 2 as Xing Chen wasn't able to do too much, but Yarkor all of a sudden is getting these 4-man knockups, insane plays as Kakulin. I think this is the one where we finally get to see that, but team fight aspect, I still think Hercules has a little more merit in the middle, and again, midst of a team fight, where he's going to be very prominent. But we just saw what Panatom can do if you get even slightly ahead or just slightly tanky on this Osiris. You can run at 3 members of the opposing team and literally not care about the damage coming your way. And so Yarkor gets to play the exact style I think he wants to, which is aggressive.
Yeah, it's my kind of pick there, where you can just run things forward and throw caution to the wind. And Yarkor, definitely that type of player with a little bit more skill, a little bit more calculation, I think, in his engagement than I have. I look towards Shinto as well. Shinto had an incredible game last game, didn't he, on the Merlin?
Yeah, he did.
Big Man Tings had a forgettable game, and it's not even anything that he did. He was just chosen to die by the Leviathans on cooldown as a Hera, and there's not much you can say about it once Argus and Polymorph have been used. Shinto was a beneficiary of that, and Shinto breaking the mold a little bit here build-wise, not as far as mid lane in general goes, but it was Warlock Staff, Charon's Coin, items that probably feel pretty good on this Merlin. They scaled and built up so well, and I wouldn't be surprised, Gore, if he opts for something similar here this game. And if there's still continued pressure there in the mid lane and Shinto's able to get off to a good start like that, Camelot Kings are going to have an uphill battle.
And I always keep my eyes on those because the stacking items, specifically Baba Yaga really kind of skyrocketed with her presence with those stacking items, not having to buy boots. And she finishes it around 7.5 minutes. Usually that's where like the mark has been for a lot of the Baba Yagas, being able to get their stacks at least on that first item. And it feels like Shinto, like those are the 2 items you just listed that he played and he used last game, are the, like, it's going the Baba build. He's doing exactly what he would if he was playing a different god, but I have got to keep my eyes on how fast he stacks it up. Obviously, the Charon's Coin on a Baba Yaga is going to stack up faster because you don't have to get the kills to actually do it.
Didn't really
But
matter
here for the
game.
Warlocks, it's going to make maybe a big difference.
He got all of his stacks last game.
He did it just fine.
The sheer amount of fighting that was going on got Shinto his stacks. And the Camelot Kings will be on a much better pace if they just avoid going down. You know, it was the small lead that then really ballooned out after a couple of fights. And the Leviathans were in a spot where they just ran down whoever on the Kings that they wanted to. So they can avoid that. Much better game 3 look for the Camelot Kings. To jump in from Captain Twig. Uh-oh, goodbye, Panatom. You were chosen to die this time, and the Camelot Kings lock them in place, get themselves first blood. It's a great start for Captain Twig.
Yeah, Twig had no mana, but Panatom had no assistance in that fight. Nobody from the Leviathans was there to help him. The Winds of Shamash get dropped. Genetics, as well as Netroid, also dropped their ults. There is not much you can do in a scenario like that, outside of except that you managed to burn a lot for just your life. You didn't have to burn any beads. Nobody on the Leviathans has any relics that are down, so it's an ult traded out from Panatom and his life.
Whoa, what is this? We want Genetics, and we want them now. Luckily not pulled back in. That's the threat that this Sylvanas brings. He beckons you in and then immediately turns things around. Zatman uses his ultimate to close the smallest gap I've ever seen a Chernobog ult be used for. Nearly grab a kill onto Genetics. Maybe that was kind of the kill threshold that they found. They do get the beads off of Genetics, and so that could be important on a pick that is somewhat immobile. If the Leviathans find the opportunity to get aggressive yet again onto Genetics. Now 3 games in a row, Gore, Netroid is gone for this build if we keep our eyes on the duo lane side of the map. Tainted Steel, I thought was just kind of a one-off in game 1 for a little extra anti-heal. Also thought it was a one-off in game 2. I think we're beyond one-off territory here. 3 out of 3 games, Tainted Steel start for Netroid.
I mean, the healing reduction is going to be nice just in general. I mean, there's not necessarily large heals on the other side, but you do have Erlong who's going to have some healing, as well as Wrong Yu, that Coerce giving a little bit of healing. But it's also the 15 power and prots that it's going to give to you. So maybe helping them out in these boxing matches, as well as still giving them a little bit of a boost early on. Yep. It makes things an interesting pickup for Netroid, and, well, we saw it work in game 1, not work so much in game 2. But I think later on, especially with Panatom making rotations the duo lane and Wrong Yu's presence just in the game and where exactly Netroid is going to be trying to put his damage is usually targets that are good for a Coerce. I think it's going to help deal with some of the, even though they're small healings that are on the other side.
It's been Tainted Breastplate that Netroid has gone for with the upgrade. Luckily, just enough mana to dash away from that, because Netroid was under a little bit of pressure there from Zapman. Could have been a return kill for the Atlantis Leviathans. And so a good start for the Camelot Kings. Still find themselves down 500 gold or so. This is an early gold fury. It's Icavale, it's Coerce, and it's a grouping from the Leviathans. Can Genetics make a big play? Steal away the gold fury? No, he cannot. Through space and time for Big Man Tings. Chunks a whole lot of damage off of Panatom, though. And Genetics is going to take a couple portals. Thank you very much, Big Man Tings, but no follow-up there. And so a quick call from the Leviathans to find this early gold spike.
And a good pickup for them to get that. In fact, the fact that nobody dies, I thought Panatom for sure was going to get burned down on the other end. If Tings had slightly more mana, then there's a good chance that there is a chase from the Yanis there to continue that fight and at least try to find Panatom. But really, really isolated for them to be able to pick up that Fury. Showcases how fast they can burn objectives. That Merlin plus a Coerce, you throw it all in one area and nobody is going to be safe. You've got two good auto attackers in the Yearlong Shin plus the Chernabog, and as you had already mentioned, the Shinto. Yeah, both of them having Icavale and then having Shinto on top of that on this Merlin. Objectives are quaking in their boots as of right now because they know that it's not going to be easy if the Leviathans turn their eyes over there. And that becomes, I mean, a little problematic for the Furies, right? But more problematic when you're looking at how Game 1 went and you're thinking of stealing away Fire Giants.
Yeah, stealing away FGs, starting up FGs. You know, there's been some cautious dances as Fire Giants have gone so far in this set, outside of the one earlier on that in Game 1 where there wasn't much of anything going on around it. This might be one of the highest burn comps you can have between a Coerce, Panatom, Shinto, and Zapman, all receiving that Coerce with double Icavale. So I'm excited now to see how the Leviathans transform some of their playstyle around it. Pyromancer definitely on the menu in moments like this. But the Camelot Kings, not a team that are going to shy away from some early pressure here. Genetics is on the right-hand side of the map. Panatom knows it, though. Pin onto Genetics. Could have been a pull, but Panatom is able to get himself out of it. One thing we haven't talked about all that much, Gore, is Big Man Tings on this Yanis. Bit of a different look from, I think, his standard God Pool goes. Have seen it a few times, and I think it's been pretty good. Big Man Tings, one of the more consistent mid laners here in this league. And on a playmaking pick like that Yanis, you probably give him a fair fight here. Taunt in from Panatom and some value out of the boulder, but it's not enough. And Variety goes down to Yarkor, who's found some pressure on the right side of the map yet again. Captain Twig trying to get out beneath the tier 2. A good through space and time from Big Man Tings. Maybe makes things interesting, but it's one picking out for the Atlantis Leviathans.
A good isolation to get Variety. Genetics was hanging out in the area, but not enough, especially with the healing they have to keep him alive. No
what happened?
Way
Who took it?
That
was it Big Man Tings? Oh my goodness.
Take that.
Look, they got the burn, but I guess they don't have the secure. The Camelot Kings steal away the Pyromancer, and that makes that pick all for naught. Right back to even goes the gold. And Doug is showing me Big Man Tings, and I gotta believe Doug when he's telling me something happened here. BMT over the wall takes the Pyro away.
Unstable Vortex. Look, it's, again, not a lot of damage, but it's still more than I guess the Leviathans had there. And this cues perfectly into the conversation we have to have when we talk about objective burn, which is objective secure, the other half of the coin. What do you got if you're the Leviathans for it right now? Yarkor's jump? Maybe that's it. I mean, I can't really think of a whole ton. Zapman has a little bit of a combo that can do a burst, same thing. But Shinto's is more, sustained damage and not a huge amount of burst from Panatom for it. So Pin maybe is the best out of him. Not a whole ton that makes me think, oh man, this is going to steal away the objective.
Oh man, that's a dead Variety right there. He's just getting piled on here. Panatom likely didn't even need to use his ult there, but just to make sure that they get the kill onto Variety. And so now the attention's been shifted, right? There's no way we can put as much pressure on Big Man Tings as we did in Game 2 here in Game 3. The Yanis just way too mobile compared to what the Hera was. Maybe we put some pressure onto Variety. And now Variety is 0-2. Don't often see Variety behind to this regard. It's not out of control yet. But Yarkor with 2 kills, Yarkor with Pestilence, Yarkor with a 1-level lead. You can see the seeds being planted here, Gore, especially for having an advantage when you want to burn down the big objective on the right side of the map.
Doing good work to make sure, like you said, that Variety stays out of this game. They know the Hercules is going to be a big threat, and now you've got a 2-level lead, maybe 1.5 levels, really, but Yarkor's 14 and Variety's 12. That's exactly where you want it to be. And if Yarkor can continue this amount of rate, again, that boulder, that's a secure. Unstable Vortex, apparently a secure, as well as through space and time.
Yep.
You get Winds of Shamash. We've seen it steal away an objective this set. And same thing, Netroid's ult is going to be really solid for them.
Captain Twig drop kick onto Zapman. He uses the beads and then the dash into the wall well and the ultimate to avoid everything. But he's still taking a good bit of damage here. Now you got to decide if you want to go back in. Zapman says, no thank you. Wrong you is going to provide the last bit of peel there. In a way, the Camelot Kings will go. But Zapman doesn't have ult, doesn't have beads. There is a Fury spawning here. So the Camelot Kings could start things up. But hey, a little bit of healing in lane here from Zapman will keep things interesting. Purple buff is around the corner. Oh, nearly. The trap was set, the trap was sprung, but Genetics not close enough to capitalize.
And I really like that we're seeing that because, yes, they haven't necessarily connected and made these crazy flashy plays, but it only takes one, right? I mean, let's harken back to, what, Heroine's Yanis the other day. You can miss as many of those ults as you want. It only takes one sometimes to turn a game around. And that's the case for Genetics in this poll. Also the case for Big Man Tings in that ult. I think there's two cases of the Kings where they're going to be more than capable of all just connecting on one, whether it's an ult from Tings hitting Shinto or Zap, or a good pull from Genetics. Even if he pulls a frontliner in, isolating somebody and bringing them out of position will set up the Kings for essentially T-ball.
Zapman, no ultimate, no beads, as we've mentioned already, and so therefore he will not be able to join this fight quickly, at least with his ultimate. Taunt in from Panatom, but it's only caught onto Captain Twig, who wants to be there anyway. And Big Man Tings evaporates the health bar of the Erlong Shen, and there's some setup from Variety, and the shotgun blast from the through space and time sets up for a second kill onto Netroid.
Twig jumps forward, Variety and Genetics are leaning into it, they want Shinto.
And through the portals they go, the Camelot Kings chasing them down. It's a knockback from Variety, but it's Yarkor who turns around some tethers here. Could be a few stuns on the back end, it's a couple stuns. Yarkor doesn't have the damage, he has the tankiness to stay in the fight, but can't quite complete those kills. And now Captain Twig on the re-engage alongside Variety, who's no good on the pull. That could have been a whole lot worse for the Leviathans. The Kings do get two.
In fact, the Leviathans, I would argue, turn around enough damage. Yes, you lose 2 kills, but you stopped the Fury. Ultimately, still not worthwhile for them. Not the greatest case scenario, but they do showcase that they have a lot of fight to be able to deal with the Kings. But you said, and accurately so, that it could have been worse. I mean, Variety misses a couple of pushes, misses a couple of plucks there that really could have pivoted that so heavily in favor of the Kings that we're talking about a 16-minute fire giant if they win that fight that heavily.
Whoa, Big Man Tings. What are you doing out here, my friend? He goes through a portal all on his own. Zapman up in the sky. Think he's going to crash right back down to Earth. Yes, he is. That was dangerous from BMT, but he's also able to hold on to both of his actives. There's some of that mobility. You know, that's a Hera, you're just dead, right? I mean, you got to feel that way at least, unless the Polymorph and the Argus get you some good value. But Big Man Ting's able to walk out of that one alive. And so the Fury still stands strong. Can we say the same about the Pyromancer? Maybe not. In a moment's time, Variety turns around the corner at the wrong time. It's a transformation and a taunt in from Panatom. But the ult from the mid lane for Big Man Tings get used. And that sends the Leviathans running right on back. Shinto goes down for the first kill.
And now Arkor is trying to chase down Tings, but he still has enough mana for at least one portal.
Big Man Tings does not have Aegis, but he does have the portal. Gormizer, can Panatom close this gap? The pin is there, but the beads from Big Man Tings are good. And this Giannis will walk right on away.
Well, they get both relics, though. That is a huge win for him. But look, both of his bars are just so low. It feels a little bad that you're not able to get that kill. Either way is perfectly fine. They're able to scoop up the relics because that speeds down on Variety, beats down on Tings, beats down for 20 more seconds at least on Twig, but also that Aegis that is going to be burnt. So the Leviathans are in a good spot to try and re-engage on the mid laner on the other side. And this actually pivots into something I wanted to say earlier because we were talking about the Giannis and admittedly just his survivability in lane. I actually think survivability in lane versus in jungle is a good conversation because the lanes, like a lot of things in 2020, got a little wider, right? And it made it more difficult to hit the wall and get the portal out that you really needed compared to maps of yore. Whereas once you're in the jungle, as we saw earlier from Big Man, you can just walk up to pretty much anything and get at least a little bit away from the opposing team. And I think that's going to be crucial for them as these fights pivot into the jungle.
Yep, Big Man Tings has been a magician a couple of times. An escape artist is a more apt name. Doesn't get out of everything scot-free and sends a through space and time flying on through that won't find much here. Was around the Pyromancer, so maybe that was more what he was looking for. Maybe the Leviathans are on the Pyro here, and maybe I can steal it away. Unfortunately, none of those things are true, and none of those things will happen, as the Leviathans answer back a Fury just a moment ago from the Camelot Kings, with a Pyromancer of their own, and Gore, that brings us real close to even, shy of 1,000 gold, 18 minutes in. That's dangerous territory, though, isn't it? Because this Camelot Kings team doesn't mind fighting from a slight deficit, and that's exactly what we saw in Game 1. Could be a run back, but the Leviathans, a very good team in fighting in the late as well. So this one could be a coin toss.
Yeah, I mean, this is much more, I want to say, dramatic pace of Game 2 without the dramatic outcome of Game 2.
Right.
And I guess a lot more, like a fusion of Game 2 and Game 1, realistically, where the Kings really still just hovering a little bit behind in gold, but leading the kills, kind of driving this force forward with the kills. And the fights more than anything. And these neutral objectives becoming ever more important with Pyromancer already down, with the Fury already down. It feels like there should be a grouping on right-hand side where there's a Fire Giant, but it's wrong. You caught out on the left-hand, side, right beside mid lane. Like, this is where I think the Kings are going to be able to dictate some of the pace of this game.
And if you're the Leviathans, you're right, the right side makes sense. That's where your 2-level lead is for Yarkor over Variety. This Osiris has been a menace. What feels bad is that Captain Twig also has a 2-level lead over Panatom, and that's a little bit more flexible of a positioning lead as far as things go. There's also a 2-level lead, Gore. We haven't seen much from the Hunters yet in this fight. There's a 2-level lead for Zapman, and Zapman has that ultimate, so if Netrioid is not where he is right now, which is in the back line of this fight, there's going to be an advantage for the Leviathans. Yarkor initiates things, though, as Captain Twig will jump on away. Rongyu's a little bit low, but so is the front line of the Kings.
Keeping back on the conversation for Zapman, though, finishes the Wind Demon, so already looking good. You had mentioned the 2 levels up, so his gold has definitely been available for him. He's got his tier 3 before Netroid has matched that. But also, much like game number 2, there's no Spectral Armors on the other side. It was Variety and Twig right here in their build had started that Spectral Armor, and right where that Thebes is, maybe right where this this potential Urchin or whatever
somewhere in there.
is going, somewhere where that cloak is going, was once a Spectral Armor. And that was something that helped deal with Zap in Game 1 very handily. Didn't deal with Zap in Game 2, and admittedly, he might not have been the reason they lost, but he was a huge part of it, and at least a 1/5 of it at minimum, right, because of the way the Leviathans played. And so we'll have to keep our eyes on them, because Variety, Twig, and Genetics are getting stung more by Zapman than they're able to really deal with that backline. You have to think that's an item pivot.
The goal man Zap likes this this style of play. You mean I just get to kick back in lane, farm up to level 20, and my team is feeling good? Yeah, I'll take that every time, but not going to want through space in time to be connecting in onto his lane. A lot committed onto Panatom, and the delete key pressed by Netroid. Zapman crashes back down on his ultimate. Well-timed bead. Had to use him, or else he's getting pulled back in by Genetics. Twig in on the re-jump, though. Watch out. Yarkor and Rongyu are in the back.
Good Aegis from Zapman as well, keeping him alive. But this immense push from the Kings, they used 4 ults. They got 1 kill. Is still worthwhile because they burn a lot of beads. They burn a lot of relics. But is it going to be worth it when the next fight starts? If it starts too soon, Leviathans will have a distinct advantage in terms of getting those ults out as well as setup. But it does showcase where the Kings are. You spend a lot, you only get a little bit. That's how Game 1 worked, and they can turn it into a Fire Giant if they want.
I was wondering if that's where the Kings might look. Because there was no Fury. There was no immediate turnaround on the left side of the map for the Kings to then go to and push that gold lead. Instead, in the middle of the map, the Tier 1 tower, the last Tier 1 tower that the Atlantis Leviathans had standing, goes down. And so now a little bit wider open, Gores. We've talked about a little bit around the safe havens that those Tier 1s provide. None of them for the Atlantis Leviathans now. So the buff arch from purple on over to blue, a little bit more susceptible to pressure from the Camelot Kings. But there will be a Gold Fury spawning soon. Pyromancer not far behind it. And as if you weren't aware already, we are still even. 1 pick does not make all that much of a difference because it only gets converted into a tower. And both of these teams neck and neck going into the late mid-game stage. I don't know, we're probably getting closer to late game than we are into mid-game. But anti-heal still the name of the game, Gore. This is something the Leviathans have not shied away from so far this set. Pestilence, Toxic Blade, Divine Ruin, a Contagion even for Rongyu, plus an upgraded Cursed Ankh. This has been a trend, right? A overwhelming and swift answer on anti-heal items when presented with a bit of a problem in the healing department from the Kings.
And I will say, 2 auras, they don't stack, that's a
Fury.
big deal for that. But also, like you said, the Divine Rune, the Toxic Blade. But the upgraded Cursed Ankh, the one I look at the most, because the upgrade to it is phenomenal. They take more damage.
The Gold Fury taken by the Camelot Kings, and the Leviathans threatening the Pyromancer, but this one is not going to go down quickly. Variety delayed things just enough that there's not an immediate answer from the Atlantis Leviathans. There ends up being an immediate answer from the Leviathans, and it's on to the Pyromancer. Yarkor somewhat low here, Gore. But it looks like just the old-fashioned Fury for Pyro trade.
But look at the positioning. If Yarkor, as low as he is, has to back.
He does have to
and
back.
makes it a 4v5, and there's a good pluck from Variety on the other side.
Panatom has used his ultimate. It's a big knockup from Genetics onto a couple. Captain Twig rounds the right side, drop kicks Wrong You off into the sides of the Winds of Shamash. Wrong You transforms here, leaps away from this fight. Coerce finds its way onto Zapman. Looks like that's all she wrote for this one.
It's a binary tree. It works very easily. Big Man Tings, when Giannis is in the game, has one line of thought. Did you hit your ult? If no, probably back up.
Goodbye.
If yes,
yep.
Let's go, baby. That's the gas pedal. Get aggressive.
Yep.
He misses there. A lot of his damage. A couple of unstable vortexes now that I've seen haven't been on the mark either. And so there's a lot of damage that could have been there and potentially turns that in favor of the Kings that is just shy of taking them down. And that, I think, doesn't necessarily give the Leviathans an advantage, but it keeps them in this now virtually even game despite the kill disparity.
Panatom had to use his beads in that last engagement. That's kind of immediately where my eyes looked as we reset here 25 minutes in. It was what actives got used there in that fight. So a blink from Twig is down. Genetics does not have a blink either. Panatom used his beads earlier on in that fight. So for a minute and a half, those are down. Not the longest duration, giving the pace of this game. Those will likely feel like they're back before Panatom knows it. But all that's left on the map here, Gore, is that FG, and that's where we're really going to get the relative strength of Zapman and Netrioid in these next fights, because Zapman reached level 20, felt like far before Netrioid, and is a little bit further on in his build than what Netrioid is. Yet we still haven't seen any stacks get added to that Rage. We haven't seen the relative power of this Chernobog just yet, especially given the crit build and no spectral armors yet.
You have to look at it. I mean, you look at the gold total, and it's virtually even, but you look at the disparity specifically in the Hunter builds. They both have upgraded their starters, but Zap has a tier 2 over. I did just see a power pot picked up for Netrioid, so maybe investing some of that gold in just hitting harder in the next fight. But Zapman's definitely in a good position with his attack speed as well as the stem and this crit online to, well, do what he's doing to that Draugr, but anywhere on the map, any neutral objective, and, well, except for the lack of ultimate pin, grand scheme pin, he's going to be able to do that in most of the carries on the side of the Kings, maybe not so much the frontliners. But there's still no spectral armors. That's kind of the big deal in my mind. We were talking about that earlier. Maybe not the biggest deal as of right now. The healing has been good for the Kings as well as their engage and disengage. But they haven't had a true fight to really test the waters versus Zap.
Yeah, Zapman's kind of playing both sides of the build, isn't he? He's got some bow, got the attack speed, as well as some crit in there as well. And so this is what you expect this Chernobog to do. Let's put as much pressure as we can on the left side of the map because we can ult in. He's going to have to be careful, though. The immediate turnaround onto a Chernobog can be swift, and we're going to see what Zapman elects to do here. He's pushing down the tier 2 tower on left as the Fire Giant's been started by the Camelot Kings. Yarkor engages in a 4v5 disadvantage. Panatom's done the same, but he dodges out the through space in time, and look at the massive knockup on the backside from Genetics. And the Leviathans attempting to turn around the damage, and they are doing so. Coerce spreads itself onto Yarkor, and look at the damage from Shito. Gets the kill on a Netrioid.
But he ends up getting a little bit too far. He's still alive. Zapman kills off Genetics before anybody else could fall.
Zapman into the wall, and the auto attacks hit their mark. Variety pulls Zapman into the double kill, and the Chernobog strength is known now. The Camelot Kings, they fall. They lose 3.
And I love the positioning from the Leviathan. Zap, even stepping forward to Twig, recognizes that might not be the best case scenario. Doesn't have his beat, still has his Aegis, but one drop kick into the wall and you're stunned. Still was willing to take that fight. Twig, though, going to be playing devil's advocate, stopping some backs, and he blinks in on Zap.
Oh, Zapman uses Aegis, but against the wall he is. Oh, and he dodges out the up-down and turns it around. Zapman, big play on the killing spree. A 3-kill swing for the Chernobog. What a play by Zap. He used his active that time, and the Leviathan's better off for it.
It just goes to show how different it is. This transition onto the Leviathans for Zap It's reinvigorated him, if anything, because the way they have been playing, specifically the way he played in that fight, he gets that tier 2, they don't lose any neutral objective for it, and they win the fight. I mean, you get the best of all scenarios if you're the Leviathans, and you've opened up a Phoenix, you've opened up a win condition. That's the only one opened up on the map as of right now, and you've evened up the towers. It's 3-3, and now they're in a good position. We mentioned the burn earlier. Why not go ahead and levy this advantage?
That's right. Talked a lot about the objective burn, and this Fire Giant's falling quickly, not without an answer from the Camelot Kings, but it's been reset as Genetics is engaged on. Variety dashes on away. How far has it been reset, though? That's the big question. Just about half HP. As Yarkor uses the Lord of the Afterlife, Netroid has to dash away. The front line, the engage, the initiation from the Leviathans doing serious work here. And now the transformation comes in as the FG is dropped. Netroid burns one away, but he falls in the meantime. Yarkor finds the second here for the Leviathans as Variety sends a boulder around the corner. Still strong enough to do the FG are the Leviathans.
It's a 2-for-1 trade. Duo lane for the mid laner on the Leviathans, but that mid laner is so much damage, but it doesn't matter. Twig's just gone.
Zapman deletes him. Panatom is low here as well. Big Man Tings is still on the map. Can he get in range for a steal? No, he cannot. He's been leapt on by Rongyu, and the body blocks around the corner. Zapman's got a double. The Chernabog shows up big. Rampaging is Zapman 29 minutes in.
In the middle of those two fights, big difference maker. First off, 5-0-3 for Zap. Got to give him some applause. And the big difference maker, he goes back, he buys his Silver Branch bow, and all of a sudden those crits jumped in terms of damage. The output jumped in terms of damage from Zapman. And even though you don't get the Fire Giant buff on Shinto, a little sad because he's been burning through a lot of those frontliners, you can see what Zapman does when he gets in front of them. Finally, there's a Spectral Armor for Twig, but Dave, it's starting to feel like it might be too late.
Zapman has just been playing that safety of the Chernabog so well, hasn't he? There you go. Some crits ringing out onto Variety, who does not have the Spectral Armor, able to sustain himself up with the healing that Hercules does have. So Variety has had a tough game this time. Big Man Tings put out some good damage early on. It slowed down just a little bit from the Giannis. I imagine he's still pretty high on those damage charts. It was important, I think, that Netroid took one with him before he died off in that fight. Could have been a whole lot worse. But still does not look good for the Camelot Kings. They are 9,000 gold down with 3 exposed Phoenixes. The good news is all 5 beads for the Kings are ready to go, which I find kind of wild after the way that fight went. So the Leviathans will regroup here, Gore, on the back end of some good initiation and the front line play that's opened up space. And the Leviathans are going to look for these Phoenixes.
I like the aggression so far from the Leviathans, but this is where things get a little more precarious. Defense-wise, Sylvanas pulls you in. That's a good enough kill, right, under a Phoenix to be able to turn things around. Guess who else has a really good pull to pull you back in there? Oh, someone like a Hercules could really do it as well. I think that is 2 scenarios where the Kings are going to be able to make a good defense around a Phoenix. Also the drop kick, depending on where Twig is. If he blinks behind someone, turns around and drop kicks them in, or just happens to be going for a roundabout path anyway. A lot of options to displace members of the Leviathans that so far haven't been able to come to fruition as much as they would like, and I don't think they've got the builds yet that they really want on the Kings to try and shut down Zap at 5-0-3. And he's got both relics. He's feeling just fine and dandy sitting in the back line, pouring out damage.
No. Variety walks forward, does not find a pull, and half of his health is suddenly missing. Big Man Tings weaves some in on Rongyu as well. Can Captain Twig find the initiation? No, he can't. It's a taunt back through from Panatom as Netroid uses both actives, but Panatom chases him down, and he finds himself in the dirt. Yarkor finds the kill, and the Leviathans get the left side bird.
And now they're moving over towards the mid, and it's just, again, the engage. You get a little too deep if you're the Kings, and I don't know that it's too deep, realistically. It's just the fact that the reaction time from the Leviathans is so on point that they're dodging out the damage, and you highlighted it, Variety can't get up to the front line.
Oh, to jump in onto Big Man Tings. Can you get the other carry off the board? You might not need to if Variety dies, and he sure does. And it's Panatom who deals the final blow. Big Man Tings makes things interesting because Zapman's gone. There's no more Hunter now for the Atlantis Leviathans, but Genetics doesn't have the health to keep on fighting. Panatom chops him down for the double. Shinto makes it 4. Big Man Tings, he's on a retreat, and he will die for the DSI, the Atlantis Leviathans, and the win streak. They'll win Game 3. They'll take down the Kings.
I mean, just great control this game. They pivot a lot of those fights, and it has to come down to the build. Where do these fights start getting out of hand? It's when Zapman joins. What are they missing that they had in Game 1 where they shut down Zap? Spectral Armors. It just feels like those crits, especially towards the later game, maybe a lot more synergy as well with Zapman's build in the Chernobog compared to the Heimdall. That also has to be taken into the equation. But Variety, 3 times at the end there, would step forward, take half his health, step back. And the last time he didn't get to step back, he got killed off before he could get anywhere. It was just good team fight control from the Leviathans, and the Kings weren't able to retaliate in time.
And if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think immediate standings flip-flops happen now. I think the
Bolts
the
have
Kings,
one less loss.
The Bolts have one less loss, you're right. So actually that might change some things, and the Bolts play tomorrow. But remember, the Dragons also play tomorrow, so things get a little bit interesting standings-wise here, Gormizer. This is a big old win, isn't it, for the Atlantis Leviathans? Not that they lacked confidence.
Yeah.
But it's a confidence builder, especially in the way that it happened. This game, once it really started spiraling, it spiraled. And the Atlantis Leviathans take the game, they take the set, and they take down the win streak of the Camelot Kings. That's it for Gore and I. We'll take a break, and when we come back, the desk will take us home.
After a grueling 3-game set, the Leviathans are the ones who come out on top and will be your victor. If you want to support the Leviathans, any of your other teams, or just get some general SPL merch, you can go to shop.smiteproleague.com to pick up all of your luxury items with it. There's shirts, sweatshirts, shorts, sleeves, hoodies, blankets, just Leviathans, a hooded blanket. Really comfortable, can vouch, have gotten to use it, onesies, all kinds of stuff, even just general Smite Pro League merch and apparel, from hoodies to t-shirts and hats as well. Shop.smiteproleague.com if you want to get all the insight for that one. Speaking of Insight, our title sponsor for the merchandise onto it. So one more time, thank you Insight for it, and thank you out there for watching this set, because it was a good one, Taco. Atlantis Leviathans, they made waves. It's the best way to put it.
They definitely made some waves, but honorary sellout mention as well of the gem sale that's taking place right now.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring it up is because it's one step further. You not only get some awesome gems for yourself, but you have to remember SPL teams have those wards and avatars in game and whatnot. And if you want to represent your favorite teams, maybe Leviathans, it might be a good place to start for some of you Vamos fans out there. So could be, like I said, gems are cool to have, but so's the SPL in-game gear merch to represent some of your favorite teams in the process.
Yeah, avatars, wards, just a couple hundred gems a pop if you want to use those to support your teams, or like we said, you can support some merchandise as well, whichever way you want to go for it. But game number 3, Zapman really stepped up in this one. Good Lord. At one point, we turned around. We're near a fire giant fight, and all of a sudden, he's diving in the middle of 4 people with this Chernobog. Huge adaptation. Coming out of game 1, having an explosive game 2. A little bit more back and forth here in game number 3. But ultimately, the Leviathans come out with a big fight around that FG. Zapman diving in the midst of 4, like I said, and then from there, it was just all Leviathans.
I have to give an honorary mention, though, to Yarkor. He was controlling so much. Beneath them as well, they went deep, and Shinto right there to back him up. I think that Merlin play might have been the difference maker, but that play never gets to happen unless he's got his front line setting it all up for him in advance. You can see Vrongyu, Yarkor, they are committing. They are sacrificing everything because they know they've got this Merlin mid laner Shinto daddy to take over for them. And Zetman as well with the Chernobog, of course. I think that this pick definitely worked out for the best here for the Leviathans.
Was that 6 crits in a row that he got? I counted at least 6. I don't know if one of those basics was, if one of them was a basic or if it was an ability from it, but I saw 6 there. That's praying to some RNG. Good Lord, he's got so many crits with those shots. This man's been praying to RNGesus just to make sure he could get the damage through, and he got everything he needed. Big crits, big damage, big kills as well. 672, oh my God, it's so hard.
I mean, it's part of the reason why Zap has been favoring that Rage so often. I think that the consistent crits when paired alongside of the Wind Demon, because you have to remember Wind Demon, attack speed increase, 10% pen. Not only that, but the chin size working very nicely because of that Silver Branch asset. Silver Branch, I think, one of the unsung heroes of Hunter builds here today. But Yarkor, good grief on that damage, man. This Osiris certainly trying to make it all happen here, but I do have to give some shout outs as well to Genetics on the Sylvanas, because that is not a pick that I think many would have expected to work out as well as it did in that early to mid stage for the Camelot Kings. And had it not been just to some really well executed team fights out of the Leviathans front line setting up Shinto and Zapman for success, might have seen a different outcome here.
Yeah, I was going to say, oh man, Zapman just barely won out in top damage, and then I looked at the top of that chart and saw Hardcore like 11,000 gold ahead. But talking about Zapman, we do have him standing by for an interview to talk to us a little bit about his post-game thoughts with it. Zapman, first off, congrats on the big win. How important was this win for you guys, knowing that your next matchups are going to be some of the biggest ones for you going in towards postseason?
Yeah, first off, thanks. And it was a really big win for us because we've been losing to the other top 3 teams. Granted, there were close game 3 sets, but we really wanted to get an actual win against the top 3 teams. So, and beating the Kings in the way we did it, we're really happy.
How annoying was that, Kepri, for y'all game 1 that you guys made that change to where it had to be a top 3 ban in both of these last 2 games?
Yeah, I don't know. Genetics just annoying. You know what I mean? All his picks. And but the Kepri, basically we would get kills, and then he would just Kepri ult, and then they would just come and turn the team fight and things like that. So it was really annoying. We were like, let's just get him off that pick and play straight up 5v5 team fights without having to worry about the ult.
On the combination with banning the Khepri away, what was kind of that mental reset for Game 1? Because Game 1, real close, real back and forth. Game 2, just it didn't even feel like it was the same game. What was that mental switch you guys flipped to get ready for that second one?
Yeah, we were actually really ahead in Game 1, and we made a lot of mental mistakes. We kind of like rushed Gold Furies. I called the Gold Fury, and we kind of just did it in front of them, and they stole it. Same thing with a Pyro, right? And they got like 3 uncontested objectives. So we were like, let's just slow it down a little bit. Let's play our game. Make sure we have vision. Make sure we don't rush the objectives, and keep it clean.
Well, a big congrats to you guys once again, Zapman, in your matchup. Well, good luck for you guys in your next sets next week as well.
Thank you.
I think you said it best. Genetics is just annoying, and that's one of the reasons we saw the Khepri, not just Genetics, but Khepri in general, a bit of an annoying pick for it, but a lot of confidence. And I like how he mentioned they just had to take a step back and say, guys, we're not playing our own game. We need to slow down, kind of reset our own momentum, and maybe if we don't get in Game 1, at least for Game 2, we can step out and play our own style.
Yeah, Genetics definitely an impressive player in his own right, but the Leviathans certainly putting in the work here to play catch up with some of these other teams. And now for the Bolts, I think they might be salivating at the mouths here, because the Camelot Kings taking that loss against the Leviathans is not only a boost for the Leviathans as far as like the team morale is concerned. Zap already kind of alluded to that. We wanted to win off one of the top 3 teams in our eyes, and now Jade Dragons, Olympus Bolts, they are definitely looking to close in on each other.
These are some huge matchups that we're going to see in not just tomorrow, where we do have the Bolts and the Dragons playing tomorrow. So just as quickly as the Bolts made it back to the top of the list, the Dragons can potentially kick them right back down and maybe make some fun strides against the standings. You see tomorrow, Tartarus Titans versus the Valhalla Valkyries for our first match of the day, Jade Dragons and Olympus Bolts. I believe that was the pictured match of the week, and you guys aren't going to want to miss it. You see how close it is in the standings. I mean, we're a game apart for all 4 of those teams in the top standings, between whether it's 9-3 or 8-4 or 8-3, 9-2, whatever it may be. It's close, and this is going to be a bloodbath for that top seed in the next few days of play.
Yeah, don't let yourself be deceived by the Valhalla Valkyries' performances so far throughout Split 2 here in Season 8. Have to remember, it's not a total walk in the park for the Tartarus Titans, because they need this set victory if they want to prevent the Oni Warriors, who I believe are right on their tails currently in the standings. And have to remember, standings largely just seeding for playoffs right now.
With that, tomorrow is going to be one of the biggest days of play for the week to see how all the standings are going to shake up. But that's all that we have here today for the SPL. Once again, tune in tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern in the morning, as we're going to have some SCC and then kick off the big day of SPL. From all of us here on the casting team, production, behind the scenes, and everyone else, thank you all. Have a great day.